The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Ryan. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sonier.
Present.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning.
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge.
Present.
President Green.
Present.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd. 10 present. You have quorum.
A quorum being present, we will be led in opening prayer and reflection by Michael Berg with the Progressive Jews of St. Louis.
Our Jewish tradition teaches us that justice, or tzedek, is a core value, one which we must live in our daily actions. The book of Devarim in the Torah tells us to pursue justice for all people, tzedek, tirdof, not only for those in our own families and faith. The rabbis interpret this pursual of justice as a commandment rather than a suggestion. And in this moment of intolerable pain, death, and violence, we pray for all those impacted by violence and death in the Holy Land. We pray for the grieving families of Israeli victims of Hamas's recent attacks on Israel, including children and parents killed in their homes and youth whose lives were cruelly taken from them by the hundreds while they were trying to enjoy a music festival. We pray for a safe return to their homes and families for those held captive by Hamas. We pray for Palestinians in Gaza trapped in a tiny enclave who are right now being killed, maimed, and displaced by the thousands by Israel's relentless bombing of their homes. We pray for an immediate end of this violence and a recognition of our shared humanity as men, women, and children suffer under a total Israeli siege, which blocks from 2 million people access to food, clean water, electricity, and medical supplies. We pray for a safe return to their homes and families for Palestinian political prisoners suffering in Israeli jails. We pray for peace, knowing that true safety does not come through tanks, bombs, and armies, nor through blockades or attacks on civilians or the mass dehumanization of Palestinians or Israelis. This morning, we pray and work for peace that can only come by restoring justice to the land, which is ending Israeli occupation and bringing a just political resolution for Palestinians' legitimate desire to live in peace and security and return to their lands and homes taken by Israel over the last 75 years. The long suffering of people in Gaza at the hands of Israel can in no way justify the vicious attacks on civilians by Hamas fighters, just as rage and desire for retribution for those attacks cannot justify Israel's present violence against the entire population of Gaza, violence which is rapidly creating a humanitarian catastrophe of massive proportions. Collective punishment is wrong and needs to end. As Jews, our tradition calls for us to condemn all death, including the death of our neighbor, as we would the death of our own families. May the source of life give us all this morning the courage to speak truth to power when we wish to hide, and discern between our religious traditions and the modern political projects that use them for unjust ends.
We will dispense with line item 4. Any introduction of honored guests? Any introduction of honored guests? Alderwoman from the 12th.
What was the speaker's name that just spoke?
Michael Berg.
I would like him to be my honored guest because you have presented one of the most balanced presentations I have heard, and I appreciate that. And no death should be celebrated. And so I just want you to be my honored guest because I appreciate your balanced presentation regarding both sides.
Any further introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. Today, my honored guest is 14th Ward resident Sheriff Vernon Betts, as well as good friend Mr. Richard Buteau, I see my good friend Eddie over there hanging out with us, and Buto's wife. So thank you guys for being here.
Any further introduction of honored guests? Any further introduction of honored guests? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the approval of the minutes from Friday, October 6, 2023.
We approve the minutes from Friday, October 6, 2023.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 6th, that we approve the minutes from Friday, October 6, 2023. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city official.
Report of city officials can be found in A, B, and C of the placed in a Google Drive for your review. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for the appointment to the St. Louis Hills Special Business District. The appointment of Heather Sanders. I respectfully request your approval of this appointment. Sincerely, Tashara O. Jones, Mayor.
Alderman from the 2nd, you are recognized on Mayor Jones' appointment of Heather Sanders to the St. Louis Hills Special Business District.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I move we adopt and approve the Heather Sanders to the St. Louis Hills Special Business District.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 2nd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 6th, that we approve Mayor Jones' appointment to the Hills Special Business District. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for reappointment to Senior Citizen Service Fund Board. The reappointment of Ms. Ann Bands. I respectfully request your approval of the appointment. Sincerely, Tashara O. Jones, Mayor.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on Mayor Jones' appointment to the Senior Citizen Service Fund Board.
Citizens Service Fund Board.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 6th, that we approve Mayor Jones' appointment to the Senior Citizens Service Fund. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Does anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? Does anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? Does anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendars? Seeing none, we can dispense with line item 9, 10, and 11. First reading of board bills. Alderman from the 14th. You are recognized on the motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Board Bill 139 for first reading.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules to introduce Board Bill 139 for first.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Board Bill number 139 for first reading. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd. 13 aye votes.
By your vote, you have sustained the motion from the Alderman from the 14th. If you could please place Board Bill number 139 at the end of the first board bills.
So noted.
First reading of board bills.
Board Bill 133, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service, authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller of the city of St. Louis to execute a contract for sale of real estate to accept a deed to certain real property located at City Block 2017 owned by the American River Transportation Company, LLC, and to execute a deed to ARCO for certain city-owned property located in City Block 2709 in the City of St. Louis, Missouri, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 134, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a lease agreement between the City of St. Louis, Missouri, and Waco Transloading for a period of 10 years for the purpose of interior receiving, processing, storing, and transloading cargo and/or warehouse or distribution center at or near 4300 South First Street with other related improvement containing the severability clause. Board Bill 35, sponsored by Alderman Ryan, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing the St. Louis Treasurer's Office to accept cities addressing fines and fees equitably program up to initial amount of $10,000 plus a subsequent anticipated award up to $35,000 for project implementation containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 136, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller of the City of St. Louis, owner and operator of St. Louis Lambert International Airport, to enter into and execute on behalf of the city the Third Amendment to Cargo Facility Lease Agreement between the City of St. Louis, Missouri, and Jet Links St. Louis, which is attached hereto as Attachment 1 and made a part hereof, containing the severability clause. Board Bill 137, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan dated August 23rd, 2023 for the 4132 South Compton Avenue area. Board Bill 138, sponsored by Alderwoman Keys, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan dated July 26, 2023 for 3041 Locust Boulevard area. Board Bill 139, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge and Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment wherein the Board of Aldermen authorizes and accepts and receipts of funds awarded by the state of Missouri for year-round paid jobs, internships, and job training for the youth residing in the City of St. Louis, appropriate such funds to the extent award to the St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment for the purpose of grant, authorizing the Director of St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment to make, negotiate, and execute any and all contracts and documents on behalf of the City of St. Louis needed to expend such funds containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of first reading of board bills.
Development Committee.
So noted.
Reference to Committee of Board Bills.
To the HUD Committee, Board Bill 133, 134, 137, and 138. To Public Safety, Board Bill 135. To Transportation and Commerce, Board Bill 136. And to Health and Human Development, Board Bill 139. That's the extent of reference to committee.
Second reading, report of Standing Committee.
The following board bills were reported out of HUD's with a due pass recommendation. Board Bill 123, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, an ordinance amending ordinance number 70794, which adopted the 2018 International Building Codes with amendments by the addition of a new subsection 119.3, to authorize the building commissioner to take steps to secure vacant buildings or structures of 500 or more square feet which impose significant extensive concerns to the health and safety and well-being of the public, to prevent the entry and occupancy of such building or structure, including the use of steel barriers or plates, and engaging the services of a security service provider, and the cost of any such measures being paid for by the owner of the building or structure, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 131, Committee sponsored by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing the mayor and the comptroller to enter into and execute agreements with HUD for the receipt of the 2024 Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership, American Rescue Plan Program, Emergency Solutions Grant, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, containing an emergency clause. The following board bill was reported out of Legislation Committee with a due pass recommendation. Board Bill 87, sponsored by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderman Ryan, and Alderwoman Velazquez, an ordinance repealing Section 2.08.010 of the city's code, which provides for the nomination of candidates for the office of mayor, comptroller, president of the board of aldermen, and the alderman at primary election, and in lieu thereof enacts a new section 2.08.010 to eliminate the primary requirement where two or fewer candidates filed declaration of intent pursuant to section 2.08.050 or if two or more candidates file declarations of intent and the candidate or candidates withdraw pursuant to 2.08.400, leaving two or fewer candidates, in which cases the two candidates or candidates shall advance to the general election. The following board bill was reported out of Transportation and Commerce with a due pass recommendation. Board Bill 110, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the issuance, establishment of term, and negotiation sale of special facility revenue bonds not to exceed $80 million to finance the cost of purchasing, extension, improvement, or enlargement of special airport facilities containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 111, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller of the City of St. Louis, owner and operator of St. Louis Lambert International Airport, to enter into and execute on behalf of the city the display advertising concession agreement between the City of St. Louis, Missouri, and the Lamar Airport Advertising Company, which is attached hereto as Attachment 1 and made a part hereof containing the severability clause. Board Bill 112, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, making a supplemental appropriation to the annual budget for fiscal year 2024 beginning July 1st, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024, pursuant to ordinance number 71660, amounting to the sum of $1.5 million for procurement of services listed hereto as Exhibit 1 and made a part hereof containing the severability clause. Board Bill 113, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller of the City of St. Louis to enter into and execute on behalf of the city the banking concession agreement between the City of St. Louis, Missouri, and the U.S. Bank National Association, which is attached hereto as Attachment 1 and made part hereof containing the severability clause. The following board bills were reported out of Public Infrastructure and Utilities Committee. Board Bill 115, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to conditionally vacate above surface, and subsurface rights for vehicle, equestrian, and pedestrian travel in the easternmost north-south alley in City Block 792 in accordance with the Charter Authority and in conformity with Section 14 of Article 21 of the Charter, and imposing certain conditions on such vacation. Board Bill 116, sponsored by Alderman Oldenburg, an ordinance authorizing the Police Commissioner on behalf of the City of St. Louis to enter into an executed grant agreement with the Missouri Department of Transportation to fund the purchase of 3 radar speed trailers to replace outdated and non-repairable speed trailers, appropriating funds thereof, and authorizing the Police Commissioner or his designee to enter into contracts and expend the funds to the extent received containing the severability and emergency clause. Board Bill 124, sponsored by Alderman Ballmer, an ordinance establishing a two-way stop site at the intersection of Brandon Avenue and Lindenwood Avenue, regulating all traffic traveling north and southbound on Brandon Avenue at the intersection of Brandon and Lindenwood Avenue, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 125, sponsored by Alderman Ballmer, pursuant to ordinance number 70333, as amended by ordinance number 71394, an ordinance directing the Director of Streets to install speed humps to calm the flow of traffic at various locations in the 5th Ward. That's the extent of second reading and report of standing committees.
Report of special committees.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 15, board bills for perfection consent.
Board Bill 100 as amended, sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, pursuant to ordinance number 70333, as amended by ordinance number 71394, an ordinance directing the Director of Streets to install speed humps to calm the flow of traffic at 60 locations within the city's Soulard neighborhood. Board Bill 102, committee sub-sponsored by Alderman Aldridge, pursuant to ordinance number 70333, as amended by ordinance number 71394, an ordinance directing the Director of Streets to install speed humps to calm the flow of traffic on certain blocks in the 14th Ward. Board Bill 118, sponsored by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, an ordinance establishing a three-way stop site at the intersection of Clara Avenue and Persian Avenue, regulating all traffic traveling north and southbound on Clara Avenue, and all traffic traveling east and westbound on Persian Avenue at the intersection of Clara Avenue and Persian Avenue, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 121, sponsored by Alderwoman Switer, pursuant to ordinance number 70333, as amended by ordinance number 71394, an ordinance directing the Director of Streets to install speed humps to calm the flow of traffic on the various blocks in the First Ward. Board Bill 98, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing the Department of Health to accept a 5-year opioid data to action grant award up to $103,292 from the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 99, sponsored by Alderwoman Boyd, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing the Department of Health to accept a public health infrastructure grant award up to $621,818 from the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of board bills for perfection consent calendar.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adopt the board bills for the perfection consent.
Members of the board, I move that we adopt the board bills for perfection consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we adopt the board bills on the perfection consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd. 13 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th to adopt the perfection consent calendar. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 33, Committee Sub, sponsored by Alderman Narayan, President Green, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Sanier, and Alderman Browning. An ordinance requiring a permit to operate a short-term rental containing a severability clause.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 33, Committee Substitute.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to put Board Bill 33 floor substitute in front of the board.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we place Board Bill number 33 floor substitute in front of us. Any discussion? Alderman, I think we have to make a motion first to do committee substitute and then floor substitute.
All right.
Because you have to move to perfect that, and then we'll take the floor
Okay.
sub.
I move that we perfect Board Bill 33 committee sub.
Okay, it's been moved by the by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill number 33 committee substitute. Alderman, now you can move for your floor sub.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we put Board Bill 33 floor substitute in front of us.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we place Board Bill number 33 floor sub in front of us. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Please mark Alderman Cone as an abstention. All right, Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. So we have discussed Board Bill 33 in various iterations over the last 5 years. In 2018, legislation to regulate short-term rentals was first filed with this body. Over the last 5 years, it's gone through several iterations. We've had many committee meetings. We've had town halls. There was an online portal. We have had robust public discourse on this, and I know just from talking to many of the members on this board in this current session, we've had 4 committee hearings on it, as well as I don't think from discussions that any one of us has been able to go to any committee meeting and not, or excuse me, community meeting and not hear some discussion of what's happening with the regulation of short-term rentals. During those committee meetings, we sought public feedback. We got a lot of public feedback, and we incorporated that into the committee substitute. We then got feedback on the committee substitute, and I worked with several members of this board to come up with the floor substitute, and that was sent earlier this week to everyone to go over just some of the changes in the floor substitute. We clarified language that short-term rental violates the 2-night minimum, that they'll be revoked. We added language that no permits will be granted in what we're calling non-occupied permits for any structures that are receiving TIFs or tax abatements. We changed the overall cap to reflect the number of units in a building to try and address the situation that we heard about from folks, particularly downtown, with the so-called ghost hotels. There's a affidavit that's going to be provided by the building division to facilitate online applications. No permits will be granted when a certain parcel is in problem properties. We removed some language that became redundant. We changed language from a period of 12 months to 24 months. So if you get 3 violations in a 24-month period, the building director will revoke your permit. Now, I want to be clear that the building director can move to revoke a permit on even a single issue, but at 3 within a 2-year period, they must. And then the rules that the building commissioner will promulgate need to be approved by BPS. That change was on the advice of the city councilor's office, and then we updated the effective date of this. This current piece of legislation that's in front of us has support from the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. It has support from the building division. It has support from the assessor's office. It has support from the mayor's office. It has support from Greater St. Louis. It has support from, well, I shouldn't really say support, but we've worked with the various industries to try and limit our liability, that they're not going to sue us about this, because we've seen in other places that when the platforms engage in litigation, it can be lengthy and costly. I believe, and the various city departments believe, the city councilor's office believes, that this is the best bite at the apple on regulating these that we're going to have at the moment, given the various logistical concerns on actually enforcing these ordinances that we've seen throughout the country. And I hope for your favorable consideration. I certainly don't want to go any longer without regulation. People say this is going to legalize these. These are already here. They are everywhere. And at the moment, we don't have regulations on them. So even if you're not the biggest fan of this bill, this creates a permitting process that then the city can remove the permit, and then we can treat it like any other non-permitted business where we can shut it down. Just last weekend, we had a shooting at a short-term rental where a young man was killed, and 2 other young folks were injured. These people had they're from the St. Louis area, and they had their mom's credit card and booked the short-term rental, and tragedy happened there. And under this legislation in front of us now, we would be able to remove the permit from that short-term rental and ensure that that doesn't happen again at that location. We need some regulation here. We've said it over and over and over. Currently, it's just the Wild West. There's no regulations. Some people say that this doesn't go far enough. That may be true, but at the moment, there is nothing in place. I would urge all of you to get these regulations on the book. Let's look at what these regulations, how they work, and let's come back and change anything that needs to be changed. Very, very rarely do we pass a perfect piece of legislation through this body, and I don't anticipate that this piece is going to be any different. We're going to have to continue to come back and tweak this legislation as that industry changes and as the expectations of the people of the city of St. Louis change, to keep on addressing this. And I guarantee we'll be back at it. And we have a year before any of these regulations must come into effect, meaning that we have time to address any issue that comes up in between now and the effective date as well. So I urge you all for your favorable consideration. And with that, I renew my motion.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I guess we can sit. I don't know the protocol here. Do we stand? Do we sit? I don't know what to do. It's very awkward. It's very awkward to sit with the microphone. I had my first question for the alderman from the 4th. Would you yield? Would ask if the alderman from the 4th would yield.
Would the alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the alderwoman from the 8th?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to clarify, Alderman, the floor substitute is the same as we had sent around earlier this week. Is that correct?
Yes, that the floor substitute, I believe, on Wednesday was sent around and then uploaded to the drive with the hope that everyone here would have as much time with it as possible before the hearing today.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to verify if any changes had been made. I had a couple of amendments that I had. I'm not sure if they were fully uploaded to the drive. I wanted to have a moment to discuss if possible. They're nothing new. We've seen them in committee, et cetera, but I just wanted to discuss a couple of them before the board here today, if possible. So if you don't mind giving me just a quick moment here to figure out where those are. I know we were trying to triangulate if they were. Okay.
Madam Clerk, can you verify that the amendments are in the drive? Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So we only have amendments to Board Bill 34. I can definitely check with the clerk to see. You give me just a second.
Alderwoman from the 8th, did you have amendments for both 33 and 34?
While I'm looking for while we're kind of figuring these out, a question for the Alderman from the 4th, if he'd yield again.
Would the Alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 8th?
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Alderman, the discussion we had about two issues. First would be in residential zones, we had some discussion in committee. I proposed an amendment to limit short-term rental applications in residential zones to owner-occupied units. Is that a part of the floor substitute?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I just couldn't hear you well.
Sure. During committee, I had gone through a list of several amendments, one of which was limitation on short-term rental applications in residential zones to owner-occupied units only. Is that part of the floor substitute?
No.
Okay. One of the other issues I discussed in committee was related to units that received tax incentives and a request that short-term rentals be limited, they not be granted to units that, or buildings or properties that are currently receiving tax incentives from the city or state. Is that included in the floor substitute?
It is, with some nuance there. We worked with the city councilor's office to come up with some language there because we wanted to ensure that someone who actually resided in the unit could still, if they went on vacation for a week or whatever, have the what we call under this the occupied short-term rental. But if you're holding something as an investment property and it has a TIF, then or an abatement, no, you cannot get a permit at that location.
Thank you. So the nuance would be that it could be owner occupied only for property receiving a tax incentive.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. And then there was a discussion, I had proposed an amendment that restricted short-term rental applications in housing that was designated specifically for low-income residents to ensure that those units be set aside specifically for folks of low income and not be used as revenue generating properties. Was that included in the floor sub?
So not really, but the reasoning behind that was the building division didn't have a clear way to delineate that. That's something that, you know, we say often, affordable housing, but there's no specific, like, this is affordable housing, this is not affordable housing. So I think a lot of affordable housing is incentivized. And so I think we capture a lot of that in that incentive amendment.
I would agree with you. I just want to make sure. I mean, one of the issues that comes as a result of a proliferation of short-term rentals, you know, these are bought as housing units are bought, both single-family and multifamily homes, as for investments, and developers and investors get a lot more income out of the short-term rental units than they do out of just renting to a general person. So you're taking housing units off the market, and the result of which is to inflate housing values. It inflates rents, and it really furthers the affordable housing crisis in the city. So just recognizing that and trying to be as protective as possible of our housing units and our housing markets to reduce the overinflation as a result of these types of investments is important. I'd like to visit the amendment related to single-family homes and residential side of things. While we're working on this, finding this, I do have the.
So Alderwoman, the clerk tells us that the amendments that you sent were in committee, but were not sent for today. So they are still in the committee folder and need to be sent
back?
to be requested to be heard today.
Okay, so while we're furthering discussion, I'd like to make sure just that one amendment, since the others were largely taken care of, is presented for discussion before the board, Madam President.
Okay, you would have to submit that to the clerk in order for us to
I'm
take
going to defer to my colleagues to continue discussion on floor substitute of Board Bill 33 while I work on that. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 2nd.
Certainly. I want to thank the alderman from the Forth on his work. I know it was also a team effort from a lot of aldermen and others at city. I don't think any city's got this right? I don't think any city's got this perfect. It's a struggle, but there also needs to be a balance, right? The demand economy around short-term rentals is here to stay. It's how we regulate it and continue to regulate it as it changes and as our economy changes as it relates to travel and hotel and hospitality. I do think that at the end of the day, this floor substitute does bring a good level of regulation to this industry. I think you're always trying to defend against the unknown, and where bad actors can cultivate and then really deteriorate quality of life in neighborhoods and impact the public safety and welfare of the city. So I do think this floor substitute at the end of the day, it doesn't have quite enough regulation for me for low density single family neighborhoods who do believe when they're purchasing a home that they're doing so with the intent of having that type of quality of life. And nobody wants to live next door to what feels like a hotel. Now, maybe from a legal and a ordinance language perspective, we're not classifying homes as hotels, but multiple night stays from different guests certainly does raise sensitivity to neighbors that feel as if they don't have neighbors. And when you buy into a neighborhood, and I'm not trying to get, Mayberry here, but when you buy into a neighborhood, you like the idea. Residents, I think, like the idea of knowing their neighbors, right? And having rapport and a relationship with them. It's more eyes on the street. I think it makes them better citizens. And I don't think there's enough protections at the moment for that low density neighborhood protection. I do like that there is regulation so that if a problem exists, right, you can revoke or limit that permit to any individual user. However, that does put the onus on our residents to be vigilant, and to not only are they looking out constantly in the city to keep their families safe, but now it's another issue of we have strangers next door and they might be throwing a party, or they parking on the lawn or blocking the sidewalk. All the issues that I think that comes along with allowing this. I do struggle with this though, also because I don't want to limit the creation and the growth of wealth. And I think in most people's circumstances, their home is their largest investment and their asset. And I don't want to restrict any individual from making a living or making additional income. And this short-term rental platform does that. In some people's cases, in most hosts' cases, it's their sole profession. They're real estate professionals. And I admire that, and I want them as part of our robust economy. I would like the Alderman from the 4th to yield for questions, if he would, please, Madam President. Would the Alderman from the 4th yield for questions?
Would the Alderman from the 4th yield?
Absolutely.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Alderman. And again, good job. I know this is not an easy bill to carry. This is a lot of parties interested in this and a ton of work. So I do applaud your efforts, and I sincerely do mean that. My question in my preamble there was really around the protection of low density areas. And I know this came up, in several conversations around, well, can we adopt something similar to Kansas City or other municipalities, which really restricts or limits this type of activity in low density single family neighborhoods. And I'm just curious if why there might have been some resistance for further strengthening of the regulation around that.
So to put it in a nutshell, that is something that we've seen litigation around throughout the country. We've seen a lot of litigation surrounding that. The Kansas City ordinance, which has that in it, is currently being litigated. Additionally, I want to be clear that there's nothing in this bill that prevents any legally binding agreements between homeowners associations, condo associations, from prohibiting these outright. And so if you live in a neighborhood that has a neighborhood association, a homeowners association, the homeowners association can ban these. And one of the things that you sign in the affidavit is that you're not subject to any of these HOA or condo association bans. I think we've tried to create a density cap there by addressing that in multifamily structures. So I know near me, for example, a lot of people would consider that for the most part single family housing, but there's a lot of 2 families and a lot of 4 families there that people live in. And oftentimes, in my experience at least, that's where we find density of these short-term rentals that can at sometimes be problematic. And so we're trying to address that through that structure. And to the previous Alderwoman's discussion, we were also looking to maintain affordable housing for the residents of the city of St. Louis by trying to preserve a lot of those 4 families in particular. And in a lot of neighborhoods, 4 families are an affordable way for a person to have a nice place.
I appreciate that response. Thank you, Alderman. I have another question around the actual catalog and collection and the knowing of how many of these exactly will exist. And this is anecdotal, but it is a real live example. I was at a neighborhood meeting Tuesday night, and a host came up to me of a platform and said, look, I'm a rule follower because my husband makes me, so I will, the 8 or 9 properties that I have, I will, follow the rules. But I lived in Austin previously, and Austin was, if they were kind of the beachhead to some of these regulations around short-term rentals. And she said she was able to operate her properties in Austin for 4 years without anyone from the city contacting her, telling her she had to have a permit, bringing any sort of regulation to it at all. And I think we're dealing with the 80-20 rule here, where 80% of the people are going to be pretty darn compliant with this, right? Especially if it's a source of income for folks, they're going to be compliant. But it's that 20% that I think we're really grappling with. So I'm curious how the building division and other city departments are going to avoid that very aspect, where someone had a 4-year runway to be totally under the radar.
Sure. And I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because that was a deep concern of mine, that we were really only going to create hurdles for people who followed the rules. And so I certainly want to create a fair sandbox for business to play in. I'm not trying to handicap any specific section. And it's almost amusing, because we're dealing with big tech here, but there are tech solutions. And that's part of the advantage of being a late mover on this. The building division has identified third-party vendors that essentially crawl all of these platforms' listings and are able to determine if there is a permit through the city for them. If there's not a permit, then they're unpermitted, and they're going to have some issues in this legislation. And the Mr. Oswald with the building division has already identified several of these third-party vendors. That's one of the reasons for the, I guess, pushed out effective date here, is to allow him to contract with those third-party vendors.
That will monitor.
Exactly.
Constantly monitor the various platforms.
Exactly.
See where they exist, and then reference those to ensuring that they're permitted.
Exactly.
Okay. That's great. I have nothing further in terms of questions. Alderman, I do again thank you for all your work on this. I'll surrender the microphone, but before I do, I just will say that I would urge the board to strongly consider some amendments that are coming from our colleagues here around that preservation and further protection in low-density neighborhoods. And moreover, let's not be afraid of a legal challenge. Let's let our neighbors and our friends know that, if you buy into a low-density neighborhood, we'll try to preserve that quality of life. Thank you, Madam President.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Court, if the alderman from the 4th would yield.
Will the alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the alderwoman from the 12th?
I will.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. I want to know why you made a decision to opt out and leave those places that are zoned a single family into the short-term rental agreement. The whole point of buying on a single family streets are so that you don't have multiple different kind of families, and you make your choice for that. And so I have a hotel that operates as a short-term rental, now that I think about it, and it's up against all a single families, and we have problems all the time. And I hear you in your presentation, you talked about the time limit in which that they have to be at least 2 days, but the opposite would be our concern, that in doing this, you might have somebody who's discovered a way to go around a single family, and now they're bringing people in there all the time, especially some of these homes are 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and they got different people coming in there all the time. And so how do you preserve your a single family? How does that not, in fact, get rid of a single family?
So I think there's 3 parts there, I think, first off, to address. So first, I think the first one we've already addressed, and the very real threat of litigation. I think second, the mayor's office has indicated a real hesitancy to sign this bill if there is, an outright ban in a single family. And I think the third part is, through these regulations, if there's a short-term rental in a single family that you notice, I mean, 3 complaints in a 24-month period is not a huge hurdle to overcome when you have a problematic unit. So I think for a lot of these that people have real issues with, they're going to run into issues with the building division very quickly, because there will be complaints.
So I want to let you know I have a store that's at the corner of Shreve and Anderson. We have had 7 shootings in a year. It is like pulling teeth to try to get them to close it. They say they cannot figure out how that's a nuisance. They can figure out how loud noise is a nuisance, but they can't figure out how 7 shootings, one of them killed the owner inside of the place, is a nuisance. So forgive me and if I don't quite have this the confidence that you do.
So
in finding that.
I want to be very clear here. There's a reason that we did not go through the typical problem properties in this legislation, because the problem properties has its own problems. So we created a different track for the building director to basically, in his sole discretion, revoke a permit on even a single instance of a violation of this. So for for if there was an act of violence surrounding a short-term rental, the building director could that day just say, no, you don't have a permit to do this anymore. And if they continue to operate just like we would any other non-permitted business in the city, we can move in to shut it down.
So just to let you know, the Director of Public Safety has that very same option right now under nuisance property. He does not have to have any police reports, or she doesn't, so I won't be sexist. Either one, whoever would be the Director of Public Safety, you have to have a reasonable belief that a place is a nuisance. And yet, we have had to fight tooth and nail to get these several other places shut down with shootings. To me, and one of them is around the street from a school. Makes no sense to me. So there is that pressure from someplace to keep that property open, even though we've had 7 shootings. So we're getting ready to have press conferences. So that's why I don't have confidence in that procedure, because it's the very same wording that you're using that's right now in the nuisance property that does not work.
So it's not exactly, because I think it's important to note, after that third violation, the building director must act.
So you put
So they have to. It's no longer discretionary after a third issue.
Okay. And so what makes you think that I or anybody else that lives on the street that is now currently zoned a single family will not also take the city to court? You're talking about legislation, because that's why the people moved there. And we let them rely, and in law school, we know something about detrimental reliance. They relied that they would live on a single family street. And now all of a sudden, we're going to come and say, no, you don't. You don't have that right. And the only people who have that right are people who have a restrictive covenant or a homeowners association or whatever. But they already thought that their right was that they were living on single family. So we're effectively, to me, rezoning housing without their permission. And we actually have a process if we're going to rezone people's housing, and that's what we're doing. So how did you get around that?
Well, so I guess two points I'd like to address there. For the first part, I think if someone was to want to litigate that, they have been welcome to this entire time, because these things are not new. They've been here. And to address the zoning issue, that's what the companion bill 34 is. It addresses that zoning.
And I hear what you're saying. You're saying, but maybe they haven't had a problem, but the more we put this out there in the hemisphere, then people start thinking this is what, we just have that hotel, which we almost had closed down at one time. I have, and it's been real quiet because we just stay on them. But I don't feel comfortable telling people I got you to rely on moving to a single family, and now I'm going to say you really don't have that. I do live on that has a restricted covenant, so it's not so much me, but other places that don't have that. That's not fair. And at a time when we are losing population in the city of St. Louis, the taxpayers, that's not something I want to agree to do. If you moved on a street and it's a single family, that's what you expect. When you move C, D, E, even B, 2 family, I understand. But when you purchase your home, and you can purchase your home in a lot of people, a lot of different places, and you buy a place that is a single family, that is what it should remain. And we should not be trying to backdoor it and take that away. And I hear you saying that, well, it was already, but that doesn't mean it was legal. And maybe the reason it wasn't litigated is because we didn't have that many doing that, and people were afraid to do it because we didn't make it really legal. Now we're saying this is legal, this is what we agreed to. We understand that this is going to take away a right that you've had. And what I want to know is, did the city councilor say that this was legal for us to do this?
I worked very, very closely with the city councilor on the entire drafting of this, and so this is the vast majority of this is their work product. So yes.
So they said that was legal. to change zoning, because that's what you're doing, because once you have a single family and then you let other things happen, that's not a single family anymore, and that's effectively changing zoning.
Yes, and that's what Board Bill 34 does. That's the companion bill.
Is to change it so that we no longer have a single family?
It does not get rid of a single family, but so 34 came through the Planning Commission because we can't, really, there's no way to regulate any short-term rentals without acknowledging them. So 33 and 34 are companion bills that move together. That's the way that this has worked. That the city councilor's office has indicated that this should work since this process initially started back in 2018.
This should work is that we're rezoning all a single family in the city of St. Louis so that it no longer exists. That's my question to you.
So
Except for those with restrictive covenants or neighborhood associations that restrict that.
I'm sorry. Could you? I'm getting some. Could you? I'm not. Yeah.
Okay,
But I just
so-
couldn't hear exactly what you said.
So we are in effect removing a single family from our zoning and making it so that a single family no longer effectively exists.
No.
Well, how does it exist? But you said it would be protected if they have a restrictive covenant or if they have a neighborhood association. But even if you have a neighborhood association, if all people didn't sign into that agreement along with the restrictive covenant, it doesn't necessarily cover all those properties. And I don't know how many people in the city of St. Louis, unlike counties or condominiums or things, have neighborhood associations that restrict that. So basically, if I live on Lindell and I have a 7-bedroom mansion, if somebody wanted to do a short-term rental, they could do that, and they could have different families renting all the time, because from what I can understand from this bill, you cannot do it any shorter than 2 days, but is it prohibitive how long you could do short-term rental?
So the definition of short-term rental is a lease of less than 30 days.
Okay.
So anything in between that 30-day and 1 year, medium term, and after that you have a lease of years.
So 30 days would be or less short-term rental, but then could I then lease it to somebody else for 30 days?
I'm not sure that I follow your question. So
I came in and I wanted to rent a room on Lindell. I wanted to rent a place on Lindell short-term rental. And me and 7 or 8 of my friends, we leased a mansion. And we stay there 29 days, and then we have to leave because rental. Then could that person bring somebody else in and do short-term rental for another 30 days?
yes.
So how do I live on a single family anymore? What is my protection as a single family? I don't understand how that is still a single family, because what you're really creating is a short-term rental someplace that right now people are not doing, because if you got to have a family that lives in a mansion that is related, which is what our covenant says, you have to be related. So you could just really use that as kind of a apartment, short-term apartment rental all over the city, no matter where.
Well, so first off, I think that's already happening all over the city, and that's what this is trying to address.
I mean, it's not happening in my city. You're creating a problem that's not happening except for that hotel, and that's a problem. So it might be happening a lot downtown into other areas, but we haven't had that. And so now, to me, we're getting rid of a single family, and that's what I want to live on. That's what I like living on. That's what I don't want to see. I've been in my house 38 years. I'm one of the newest people on my block, okay? And so people stay 40 and 50 years, and that makes it very stable. And the thing that's also happening in the city of St. Louis, if you haven't looked at the numbers, is that 29 middle-class black families a month are leaving the city of St. Louis, okay? This will exacerbate this for me. So if you're creating a problem that didn't exist, why is it that you're putting it all over? Why didn't you address it in the neighborhoods where it was a problem?
I think that there are people from every class of zoning, every class of residential zoning who say that this is an issue in their area, and then there's in every class that say that it is not an issue in their area. That this ultimately, the goal here is a compromise bill, and we know that a de facto ban in single family A, it's not tenable to many people, first off, and then we also know, like I started with, we're likely to see litigation, and frankly, the mayor has indicated that a real hesitancy to sign a bill that does that. So if we're looking for regulation, I'm looking at the art of the possible here. I'm not looking at something being perfect. I'm trying to get a regulation on the board, and once we see the regulations, we can tinker with them. But right now, we are in a completely unregulated environment. So in your neighborhood, if one of your neighbors who's lived there for 50 years wanted to put their house on the short-term rental market, there's nothing really that the city can do to prevent that.
Sure it is. It's a single family. So there are some things. It's already a de facto ban on it, and we are removing it. So we've been successful in that not happening, and that's why we have different levels of zoning. Why we have A, B, two-family, C, D, E, being multifamily, F, neighborhood commercial, G. So there's a reason why we have this, and people moved into their homes. And I'm one of the people that's the newest. I'm saying my neighbors have been there 50, 45, 55 years. Very proud of the fact that Maffitt Place used to have a restrictive covenant that didn't allow Black people to live on it. And so very proud that they were able to move to Maffitt Place. Right around the corner from me now in my ward is Shelley V. Kramer, which restricted Black people from living any place in the neighborhood. So there's already a zoning issue already that kind of keeps short-term rentals from doing that, because it's a single-family neighborhood. It's not multifamily. So to me, we are taking away a basic right that I and other people who live single families. And it's what kept those blocks very stable. And I can show you the difference of where there have been rentals just in general, the difference in the neighborhoods. So when people decide they want to live someplace, they can live a lot of places that don't include the city of St. Louis. If in 5 or 6 or 7 years, you're looking at our population is below 100,000, because when I came to the Board of Aldermen, we were like at 400,000, and now we're under 300,000. We're not doing a good job in letting people who pay taxes and who have been stable, let them know how valuable they are and want to stay here. So I absolutely cannot support something that would take the neighborhoods that are zoned, or the streets that are zoned a single family, and say, yes, you can do short-term rental. And I would look to, in fact, make it more strict and say, no, you cannot do that. And if you were going to do that, I would require that person who's doing that to live on that very street, right next to the property, so that when there are problems, they would have to deal with it. I cannot support this in the way that you have presented it. I hope that the Alderwoman from the 8th has some good, tight amendments, because I'm looking to support them. But other than that, I don't want to make it hard for short-term rentals where there's been a great place for them to occur. But I don't want you to create problems that are not in my community, because we have enough already. When I tell you we cannot close a store that has had 7 shootings in the vicinity in less than a year, and around the corner from a Catholic school, it makes no sense. So the things that you are proposing will be harder for me. And that's why we have different parts of town, and why we have different zoning. It's not that I want to be difficult. I just don't want any problems, that unintended consequences. And if the mayor is not going to sign it without the properties that are zoned a single family, I agree with the alderman, the second, I guess it is, who says, then let there be legislation, because this will not be good for people who live in zone A single family. I understand multifamily. I understand because that already you had an expectation that there would be multifamilies. You had an expectation people could be renting, but mostly in most of my single family, the people own and live there, and that's what they expect. They want to know their neighbors. They move someplace that they feel is confident, that they're confident that they're going to have a quiet place, and they could come home and enjoy where they live. And this is going to make them very upset. I guess I wasn't looking. I thought that Zone A single family was not part of this, and I missed this. So I'm not trying to do a backhanded attack. It's just something that I could not support. And I certainly couldn't support it with the person not having to live on the street and then live someplace else, because that's where most of our problems are. People live someplace else and they bring businesses, things that they don't want around their own houses. The people with the most nuisances in my neighborhood actually live out in West County someplace, and we have to put up with their nuisances, and they then say we have a right to make a living, but not really at the expense of the neighborhood. So I am not in support of a single family being a part of this, and I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 9th.
All right, can you all hear me? All right, thank you. I rise in support of Board Bill 33, the 4 substitute. This is something we've been working on. And I want to emphasize again that right now there is a stark lack of regulation in this industry across the city. I do have single family zones in my ward that have short-term rentals in them. And there's nothing stopping them from getting out of control. There's nothing stopping them from continuing to operate. We have to operate under the current flawed process that holds nuisance properties accountable. And this bill very much puts in place a enforceable mechanism to make sure that we can bring these under control, that we can hold them to be peaceful, quiet, pleasant places in the neighborhood. I think we need to really address what we're looking for to when we say single family zoning. If we're talking about noise, that's addressed by this bill. If we're talking about occupancy, that's addressed by this bill. If we're talking about how many cars you can park outside, that is addressed by this bill. We have been very purposeful in making sure that we have a very encompassing framework here that is not just legal, but enforceable. And so we want to make sure that our neighborhoods are staying peaceful. We want to make sure that we're bringing an out-of-control industry into regulation. The reason this is the solution for St. Louis, and other cities are going to do other things, but I want to mention, Kansas City is a much larger city than St. Louis City. New York City is not even in the same league as St. Louis City. So we are talking about different needs for different cities here. The regulation network, the regulation framework that we put in place or that we might put in place if we pass this bill, is sized right for St. Louis so that we can really get a handle on this industry as it affects our city, and yet also not deter the few benefits that do come from short-term rental. Now, if you know me and you know that I campaigned on this issue, short-term rentals can be a real problem in our neighborhoods, but there are some benefits that we'd like to see continue in St. Louis, such as the investment in run-down and dilapidated properties that might not otherwise see investment. We have seen over and over again that people will come in, pour a lot of money into fixing these up, and then make that money back by using it as a short-term rental. As long as they're operating in a very safe and non-bothersome way, I don't think that's a problem. I think that's a benefit for our city. We also know that guests that stay in short-term rentals are a big boon for our struggling businesses, which often see a lack of foot traffic, especially post-pandemic. So we know there's benefits here, and we need to actually strike a balance and a compromise so that we continue to encourage tourism, that we continue to encourage growth in our city. People that come here, stay in a short-term rental in a neighborhood, say, I really like this neighborhood, and then they move to that neighborhood. That's the kind of thing we like to see. So I really do struggle with this idea that we should really just clamp down and ban this throughout our city and zoning, that really, if we have the proper framework, the proper enforcement, especially on the back end, and we've been very careful and very purposeful to create that framework, that we can make sure that we get the best of both worlds, and that we get regulation, we get public safety, we get affordable housing, and that we really do benefit our city overall. Thank you.
Alderman from the 5th.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank the sponsor and the committee for all their hard work. I attended a couple of the meetings, and I expressed my belief that this should still be in committee at the last meeting. One of the problems, I guess, with having such a board cut in half is our committees are very small, so there's not much dissension. When you have 2 or 3 votes, things pass out. We have a lot of discussion. There's a lot of things that are very good in this bill. There's some things that need to change, and I understand that there's never a perfect bill. And I know we have no regulations. Right now, Airbnbs and Verbos are the wild, wild west. I have one of the wildest in my ward, owned by a company that basically, has frat parties every weekend. And people are living in hell. They've put tons of money into their home, invested in what was a single family home. The whole street is zoned that, yet every weekend they are putting up with basically, a nightclub next to their home. So there's no perfect bill. And basically, if you get down to the nuts and bolts of this, Airbnbs are illegal in any A-zoned residential neighborhood, because by definition, a single family residential means a single family living in a residential home. It means you cannot take that home and make a living off of it day by day, night by night. Yes, you can rent it out. You can rent it out to a single family resident. These are all against the law across the United States of America by single family A zoning already. And that needs to be extended into this bill. You cannot just say, okay, because of this, we have other bills in committee that are saying just because you are this or this or this, these laws don't pertain to you. Well, Airbnbs are a business. I run a business. I live and work and represent a neighborhood that is the #2 tourist attraction in the city of St. Louis. We have many Airbnbs, and they work very well because the owners usually live in them, or next to them, or within a block of them. And people understand what the neighborhood is about. But when you have people who live in Baldwin and have a company buying houses and just putting a few dollars into them, and then disrupting the lives of people who have put their life, heart, and soul and all their money into their homes, you are creating a like I say, what would happen if this was next door to you? How would you feel about it? When anyone wants to open a business in my neighborhood, I said, where do you live? I said, why does that matter? I said, give me your address, and let's put this right next door to your house and see how the hell you feel about it. Because what's going to happen to you every day when there's 20 guys throwing beer cans over your fence, urinating in the backyard, and having a wild party when you're trying to have your 8th graders, graduation party with tea and coffee and all that next door? I'm not a prude. I've run a tavern for 35 years. I've been an alderman for 21 years going on it now. I've heard every stupid idea in the world. But some of these that are coming across the world right now are the stupidest ideas I've ever heard in my life. If you buy a house, you put your heart and soul and all your money into it, you don't want a hotel next to your house. And we have to put a provision in here that protects a single family residential. That is what you buy into when you buy your house. If you want one of these next door to you, please give me your address, and anything you propose, we're going to put it next door to your house first. Thank you.
Any further discussion? The Alderwoman, I'm going to go to folks who haven't talked first. So I had seen the Alderwoman from the 7th first, and then I'm going to go to the Alderwoman from the 6th. So Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. Alderman Narayan, I first of all just want to commend you for doing this work. And I really want to commend many of the Board of Alders who were here for a long time, because I know this has been an ongoing conversation for years. I thought about reading some emails and instead thought I would just clarify. One of my first instances of coming into office and dealing with the issue of violent crime was in what was operating as a short-term rental property. And this is one of the bills that I get asked about constantly at every single neighborhood meeting. Most of my emails, if there is a policy being mentioned for those first few months, it was this. And I also got to go to the transportation and committee meetings. I think I've been to 3 out of the 4 and see the robust public comment. And so just to commend all of you all who worked on this, and also Alderman Narayan, I made note of a lot of the commentary that was given at the meetings and a lot of the amendments that were kind of proposed. And I see that you've done your due diligence to go and address these amendments and incorporate the feedback. So I want to make sure that I commend you for that. For me, most of my ask for short-term rentals have not been about legislation, haven't been in opposition to regulating them. I feel like most constituents have said we need to regulate them. Most of constituents have been like, would you take this further? I feel like this has been such a problem. It's such a danger. And so I wanted to lift up just some of the things that I noticed that I'm happy to see in this legislation. I'm extremely happy to see that now if there's an instance of violent crime, it would be much more easier. There's a clearer process to revocation, because I think that was severely missing before. And I can't wait until this is passed, and hopefully I can get ready to activate that in some properties in the ward. I like that we've been clear about the buildings division's role in this process and how that plays into it. And I like that we're also mentioning that if a short-term rental violates other ordinances that are municipal, also easier for them to call in. So all of these additional accountability parts, I like those additions. I want to echo much of what Alderwoman Tyus and I think Alderwoman Spencer said, this core message of at the end of the day, we want to represent people and families and neighborhoods and not Airbnbs. And so I think that's really important, and I totally agree with that. I thought it was interesting that short-term rentals, some of them hired lobbyists and did all of these things for representation, but we are elected to represent the people. And I think there's a clear message that the people want something. And if we don't pass this bill in some version of it today, then we will continue to have nothing. And similar to what Alderman Browning said, there are single-family residential areas within the 7th Ward that have Airbnb rentals. So they're already operating there. So I'm extremely happy to see that we're going to have something in place that addresses those concerns. And thank all of you all really for participating in this process, but especially Alderman Narayan, because I know that this is complicated and has been in the works for a very long time. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 6th.
You. I want to first start out by saying thank you to Alderman Narayan for bringing this bill to us. I do think that if we are going to talk about being a metropolitan city, we need to have laws that reflect that, and certainly having no regulation on short-term rentals is one of them. We're going to act like a grown-up city. We need laws that reflect that. And right now it is a Wild West for people and for our community. So we have had a couple incidents in the 6th Ward. I'm going to read you all a letter from the Shaw Neighborhood Association, Improvement Association, that sent one out right after we had a shooting at a short-term rental at the 4200 block of Castleman. What we did find, because we had to use piecemeal regulation, because there is none, we had to look at the occupancy limits for this one 4-family flat that was listed for 48 people. It is a company that actually owns several throughout the city. I think they own 110 Airbnbs, and I believe, I'd have to double check our numbers, that 40 of them are in the city, and I have several in the ward by the same company. Now, what we did find during this was, because there is no regulation, we had to ask the assessor to pull some addresses if we thought was something. We had to look at the occupancy permits, and certainly we asked the police department to run basically to see if there were any other incidences by the same short-term rental company. One that we had actually just sent a letter to the previous week, because they've been parking commercial vehicles on the street. Actually, I live a block away, so I made a couple of calls to the non-emergency line. These commercial vehicles are illegal to park on residential streets. And so I've been encouraging members, constituents of my ward to call. But we had just done that, and there was a shooting at an Airbnb owned by the same company. We were in contact with all the players after finding out all this information from various places because we have no regulation. And the city issued a cease and desist order that same week. The constituents in my ward called Airbnb and VBRO themselves and got it delisted. But we had to do all of this because we have no regulation process. So we were able to track some of this down, but because there's no system, it is not only cumbersome, you hope that you get all the information by putting the pieces together. I will say that the same company who owns one off of Gurney or off of Kings Highway and Arsenal. And the city also issued a cease and desist letter just this week after complaints from the neighborhood. So I do believe that why we can all agree that this legislation is not perfect, that something is better than nothing, and we need something in a big way. And I would say that even though I'm new, I know that this legislation did not the docket, the session, this legislation has been ongoing for 5 years. And again, if we are going to be the metropolitan destination that we want to be, we need regulations that reflect that, which includes short-term rentals. So I'm going to read what the Shaw Neighborhood Improvement Association said to me, and it's with the testimony with the clerk because I think it reflects the balance. On behalf of the Shaw Neighborhood Improvement Association, I write this letter as a comment on proposed Board Bill 33. Now, this was a couple iterations ago because, as we've mentioned, as Alderman Ryan has mentioned, we've had several committee hearings with robust public testimony. We've tried to incorporate lots of this into this version of the bill. Short-term rentals can be a great lodging option in our neighborhood when friends and family or people are considering moving to the area from out of town and want to see what it's like to live here. And for other short-term visitors looking to be near many of our great spaces, businesses, and institutions. They can also serve as a beneficial source of income for residents. We know that there are several short-term rentals in our neighborhood that are on property where the owner is present or in close proximity. They maintain appropriate occupancy. They are one property out of many longer-term rented or owned homes and overall serve as an asset in the neighborhood. However, we know that some rentals in the neighborhood have been rented out at excessive occupancy loads, e.g. 12 people where an occupancy should be 4, used for storing, parking commercial vehicles that block residents' use of driveways and public rights of way, and connected to events that endanger the welfare of our neighbors, such as the shooting incident during a party held at a short-term rental on the 4200 block of Castle. Board Bill 33 in its current form seems to be a good start to being able to identify and regulate properties operating short-term rentals and have a process for addressing them when they endanger the welfare of neighbors. We have heard from residents who recognize there are short-term rental properties that have value to the neighborhood, but we have also heard from residents who are long-term rentals who are concerned about the safety and affordability issues as their landlords convert long-term rentals to short-term rentals as tenants move out, as well as neighbors who are frustrated about there being no clear process for reporting current nuisance issues, the ability to restrict the number of properties on a block, and regulation of the occupancy numbers of these properties. Based on the comments and questions I have received from members of our association, we would like to advocate for what it appears you are seeking to do, creating a system that is clear and easy to be responsive for local owners of one or two small set of properties, while also providing mechanisms for restricting the number of short-term rentals within a specific area, and a clear and responsive process for filing complaints when nuisance and safety issues occur. We'd recommend using well-known existing systems to residents to be able to identify short-term rentals in their area and be able to file complaints about properties with clear categories related to short-term rentals, including identifying properties operating without a permit. When properties are being operated by owners who are responsible and actively engaged in our community and are adding to the diversity of lodging options in a valuable way, they should be supported. But when that is not true, there should be a very strong and responsive enforcement processes and consequences. And I wanted to read that because those aren't my words. Those are words from the Neighborhood Association. Why, we are probably going to go on for a little bit longer about why this legislation is perfect. I believe it's imperative that we do pass regulations on short-term rentals. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, Alderwoman from the 8th, we will go back to you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would like to introduce amendment number 22 for consideration of the board on the floor substitute. I know that it was prepared for the committee substitute, but I'm hoping we can just kind of talk through the content here of amendment number 22, which should be in the drive for everyone.
So it's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th that we place amendment number 1 to Board Bill 33 floor substitute in front of us. Is there a second?
It is numbered amendment number 22, simply
number
because all of them
22,
got
sorry.
uploaded into the drive, but this will be the first amendment that I'd like the board to consider. But Madam President, to name it amendment number 1, I think would be appropriate, however you want to handle
Okay.
it.
Yes, if we could, so we make sure that we are going in numerical order here for all of these amendments that are in front of us. If we could call amendment number 22, amendment number 1.
It will be the first. So I move that we put board bill, that we can, I move that we can put board bill, or excuse me, amendment number 1, which is described as amendment number 22 before us.
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 2nd, that we entertain amendment number 1. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Amendment number 1, what it essentially does is use, hearkening back to the discussion from the Alderwoman from the 2nd, yes, 12. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. This really limits, what this does is make an amendment to Board Bill 33 that does 2 things. 1, requires on an annual basis an application for short-term rental permit so that it really very clearly specifies that that permit would have to be renewed on an annual basis. And Part B also restricts short-term rental in dwelling districts A, B, and C, which is single family, B, 2 family, or C, multifamily, to owner occupied. So it restricts, it says no short-term rental non-occupied permits may be issued within those 3 dwelling districts. So essentially restricts short-term rentals to be owner occupied in those 3 districts. I want to say, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but what we're seeing is, we are losing population in the city of St. Louis at an alarming rate. The population statistics for this last year, 2023, are nothing short of shocking. There are 798 incorporated areas in the United States with population over 50,000 people. We are 797. That means there's only one place in the United States that's losing population faster than the city of St. Louis, Jackson City, Mississippi. And last I checked, they were having a water crisis. That means they don't have potable water in their city. And that is the only place in the United States losing population faster than the city of St. Louis. We have got to do everything in our power to keep every single resident that we have here and to provide housing for everyone who wants to be here. And the short-term rental industry is really great for bringing residents to neighborhoods that don't have hotels. I think it really is an incredible asset to many of our neighborhoods, including mine, which doesn't have a hotel. But it also has a back end impact of really inflating our housing values, which is nice if you're in the business of selling houses. But on the back end, it makes it more expensive to purchase a house and inflates our housing market. That can have really a disastrous impact. So, and it also makes renting an apartment more expensive here. It's much more profitable to engage in a short-term rental, traditional housing unit. So this amendment seeks to address that, seeks to limit short-term rentals in those zoning districts to those who occupy and own the units. And with that, I'll take questions or discussion from the board. Thank you, Madam President.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th. Or you want to yield to the Alderman from the 4th? Okay, Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I want to be clear here that I did not carve this out with the hopes that there were going to be rowdy short-term rentals in residential areas. The reason that the bill is the way it is because of very clear guidance from the city councilor's office regarding litigation. And for that reason, I will not be supporting this amendment. I would encourage everyone to not support this amendment, because or else what we risk is the very real possibility, as we've seen in other jurisdictions, that even if we pass regulation and the mayor signs it, that we see litigation and we see what's called a stay order, that the court will say, wait a minute, we're not sure about this, and so we're going to preserve the status quo, and we're going to see years of litigation, and at that same time, we will have zero regulations on short-term rental. This is not a perfect piece of legislation. I've led with that. I believe that. I know that we're going to be back here addressing this in the months and years to come. But what it does is allows for the revocation of permits. And so we can shut down problematic short-term rentals. Right now, as the Alderwoman and Alderwoman from the 12th and I discussed earlier, right now, problem properties is the only meaningful way to address these. And problem properties, frankly, just isn't working right now. So we need an alternative track, and this is that track. This amendment risks this entire piece of legislation's effectiveness, and I would encourage you to vote no. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th. I am not sure why it's blinking like that.
Speak. Hello. Okay. I guess missed a point because I thought we were addressing short-term rentals and the problems where people were having them. I didn't know that short-term rentals, to fix the problems where you were having them, would create a problem for me. That is not a solution. Oftentimes, people think everything fits, all sizes fit one. They do not. Okay. And in this case, what is a solution to the alderman from the 4th is not a solution for the alderwoman from the 12th. I've talked to the 11th and the 13th. We represent the majority of North St. Louis and a big portion of Black homeowners. It is not a solution. And when I tell you, not numbers that I made up, but numbers that are out there, and what the alderwoman from the 8th was referring to, we're losing population, but the greatest population we're losing is Black homeowners. So anything that you do to create a solution for you, I'm all for it, as long as you do not create a problem for me. The former alderman from the 3rd, which is now part of the great 14th ward, used to say, I'll vote for your legislation as long as you opt me out. So if this is what you're pushing, I want to do a friendly amendment after this in which I would opt out the 12th ward. Short of that, I have to support whatever the alderwoman from the 8th and or the alderman from the 2nd might be doing, because I do not believe that the city councilor is looking out for the best interest of what is in North St. Louis. I know for a fact that she does not live there, because when she got here, she met with me and we had long conversations. No, nothing presents. I understand now. Okay, but and that may be the way. But right now, I don't want anybody to even get the idea of let's do a short-term rental. I don't have that problem except for a hotel, and I don't want that problem. I do want to make homeowners feel that they are very important, and that when we, the city, give them a zoning class in which they can move into, that is what they're getting. I will also caution that I have not heard anybody talk about that there's a process we have to go through and certain amount of votes to change zoning against our owner's will. I'm one of those people that is against you changing my zoning. And so either way, we're going to have legislation, because I cannot sit in good conscience, and I hope other people, and I hope across the city, that we have homeowners who are in Zone A that will also start legislation. What is the problem? And I still don't understand. There is no problem of saying we're going to leave Class A out because it's already left out. I've sat here and heard my friend from, what is your name? Five, speak more passionate about anything before in my life sitting here listening to him, because he actually has short-term rentals and knows the problems, but he also knows that that's not the solution that we have with this board bill without the amendment, because he also has a lot of single family. I've been going to the Hills since I moved to St. Louis in 1978 and enjoying myself. So I know the diversity that they have in the Hill and all parts of his neighborhoods. And so the passion that he spoke about is very real. I was here when we created short-term rentals, and we tried to trust the people who said, trust us, this won't be a problem. We're bringing this in. These are some of the people who, not on the board anymore, but work for the board members, okay? And we trusted them, and it didn't turn out well at all. So what I'm saying is we should be taking baby steps. Okay, this is what we can address. We don't have to do zone A, B, C, anything zoned A, B, C right now. We can do that. If that is going to be a problem, then maybe we'll look at what that problem is later. But we ought to be addressing the problem of how to address short-term rentals that have a problem. Now, the sponsor of the original bill said, well, there's going to be lawsuits all across the United States. There are lawsuits. What I guess I need to know, and perhaps if the alderwoman from the 8th might be able to answer, I'd ask if she would yield.
Alderwoman from the 8th, would you yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th?
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
So that I stay on point and talk about your amendment, because I really want to talk to the Alderman from the 4th. Do you know of any lawsuits that have occurred regarding short-term rentals and their placement in neighborhoods Zone A or blocks that are Zone A? Are you familiar with any of that at all?
I am not.
Okay. Can you just tell me again why you think that your amendment is so important, please?
I think it's important to restrict the short-term rentals in the residential areas for the reasons I stated. I think, these short-term rentals are certainly causing a lot of problems in residential areas. People are, we need to do everything in our power to support the residents who live here. They're demanding this. I'm hearing overwhelmingly from members of the public that they, in their residential neighborhood, want to have long-term residents, neighbors who live there as their people coming and going in their communities. It's inflating our real estate market, making it very difficult to invest in our city. It's making our rents very, very high artificially. I think these are good things, but there's got to be some limits. So the design here really was to limit that. I heard the sponsor of the bill talk about the city councilor and her opinion, but the reality is I haven't seen any guidance from the asking for it on this bill. And so if there is guidance from the city councilor, I'm not privy to that. And that's unfortunate. We have, and I will also say that, for the record, I'm not afraid of lawsuits. This city of St. Louis has 300 lawsuits a year plus. And, to fail to pass legislation for fear of a lawsuit is ludicrous to me, considering that's what we have a law department for. I would argue that the cost of not reining an industry that's causing real harm to our communities. Of course, we're not talking about banning them. This is not banning them. This is saying that, in residential zones that you should be owner occupied. And I believe that I'm representing the interests of my residents and many residents throughout the city of St. Louis by asking this body to do that.
And you represent a very diverse ward that has single family, multifamily, different kinds of residents, correct?
Correct. Thank you. I do. Yes,
Right.
including downtown.
Right. And so you're not saying that there shouldn't be downtown rentals. There are just some limits of where they should be.
This is limiting, the single family homes, the zone, A, B, and C to the an owner occupied space. So when you go out of town, et cetera, and limiting and eliminating the investors purchasing family homes in residential areas, and sort of ghost neighbors.
And so we have restrictions about gas stations. Like we can't put a gas station in the middle of a single family block, right? So couldn't somebody say that the gas stations would want to sue us because we're preventing them? I mean, I'm kind of surprised that you tell me there hasn't been anything from the city councilor in writing. I thought that you all were working this out and that surely we must have something. You have not received anything in writing from the city councilor as to her position that this must be in single family A?
To my knowledge, I have not received anything from the city councilor related to Board Bill 3434. We did ask for some guidance from the city attorney in committee. It sounds like the sponsor received some guidance from the city councilor, but unfortunately, I will state that I'm frustrated about that.
Because the city councilor is supposed to represent not just the mayor, but the board of aldermen too. If anybody ever reads the charter, and those people who say, well, she doesn't represent us, or he, or the board, the members of the attorneys who work for the city councilor, they do represent us. And when we ask for opinions, we're supposed to be provided them. Thank you very much. If the alderman from the second would yield.
Would the alderman from the second yield to questioning from the alderwoman from the 12th?
I will.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Alderman, so you represent Southwest St. Louis, a lot of Southwest St. Louis, is that correct?
That geography is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Have a lot of single-family homes there.
We do, predominantly. There's some multifamily, but overwhelmingly the majority is single-family A zoned.
I've spent a great deal of time when I used to live in South St. Louis. They had Drews up there, which even though people loved it, people didn't know the people who lived behind it had problems with the parking and a lot of other things, you know. What could be great for one person may not be great for the person who lives around that. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So have you had any conversations in your neighborhood? Are people clamoring to have their single family blocks and neighborhoods turned into the ability that anybody can move in and live next to them and live there for 2 days or 5 days, or multifamilies? Is that something they've been asking for?
Yeah, Alderman, I'm glad you asked that question. It's a prolific problem among the residents and my constituents. There had been, this is about a half a decade ago that started. There was a single family non-occupied house that turned into an Airbnb, and several of the neighbors had a lot of concerns. There was parking issues. They didn't know their neighbors. They knew the prior neighbor before, grandma dies and the house goes up for sale, and the new owner was a speculative investor, had no desire to live in the neighborhood and be a resident, and was constantly putting it for lease on a shared platform. And the neighbors, God bless them, they gathered together and they put up signs. A real issue. They approached me, and that's when we started. It was about 5 or 6 years ago. We started these conversations around how do we regulate these. And I go back to the overwhelming, under fundamental concern that is, this is a low density area. We've got no problem with people enjoying this sector of the economy, but a part of town that is zoned specifically for a certain area, people rely on that. They put a great deal of confidence into the local zoning ordinances and code that exists that says, here are the like uses around us, right? Now, I can certainly, say that zoning codes have been used to disenfranchise people over the years as well, but I do say there is consistency associated with these will be the like uses and operations around a single point. I also am glad you asked that question around, I think the alderman from the 4th mentioned that this amendment that's before us would jeopardize the entire ordinance here, or board bill. But I think there's a severability clause that's in here that wouldn't any judge worth its salt to say, okay, well, it's just this section that's going to be stayed or has an injunction, but the compliance and the ongoing regulation of the rest of the ordinance would be legal.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
You bet.
So I want to say I have studied zoning law a lot in law school. They actually have classes for that. One of the things I studied at length was Shelley v. Kramer, which is illegal. So they have some things that you cannot restrict based on race, other things. But one of them is not Airbnb. Okay, there's no place in there that says Airbnb shall have the right to locate in places that are not zoned for them. Okay, so in case anybody thinks that they have a right and that they would have a really good lawsuit, that's why the city attorney probably won't give us anything in writing, because they would be hard pressed to write something and that says they have a right to have that. Now, the mayor is saying, I'm pushing that, that's the only way I'm going to sign the bill. That's a different thing. But it's not because they have a right, any kind of right. It is not, we're not basing it on their race or their sex or any kind of thing that the Supreme Court has said is illegal or our Constitution says is illegal. So to be pushing this in a place where clearly you've been elected more than once to represent that area.
That's correct, yes.
And we all know I've been elected since 1991, so I know that if anybody doesn't know, the people have spoken in my area about how they want represented and the things they want. So I find it amazing that we wouldn't have an out for those who want an out. Right. If you want your part of your neighborhood who's zoned A, if you say, well, we want that, then you go ahead. But there is a significant amount of this board who thinks that is a bad idea and that it will be detrimental to their community. And so when I hear people say, well, this is not perfect, but this is better than nothing, I always disagree with that, Alderman. And if people don't know this, if you have a vacant lot, it may be that the grass is not cut. But if they build a house there where people create nuisances and do things, you will pray for that vacant lot again. So anything is not better, would you agree, than something? Okay,
I would agree.
Better to leave it alone. Is that right?
My answer is yes to that question, yes.
Thank you, I appreciate it. If the Alderman from the 4th would yield.
The Alderman from the 4th yield to Alderwoman from the 12th.
I will.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Alderman, as I look at the Alderwoman from the 8th Amendment, which I'm going to support, she said something, and I'm surprised. Do you have any kind of legal opinion from the city councilor regarding why this has to have cover the neighborhoods on the blocks that are zoned A, single family?
So I worked closely with the city councilor's office on the drafting of this. And so this is essentially their work product, so that they have not issued a letter on their work product. But I think it's also important to note that we've seen litigation like this in New Orleans. We've seen litigation on this in New York. We're seeing currently litigation in Kansas City on this. This is a hotly litigated issue that the courts have, frankly, come down both ways on. But this amendment, one of the other things this amendment does is it makes downtown one of the only places in the city that is going to have short-term rentals, which is one of the things that we specifically were trying to address with this legislation. It's not the hill I'm looking to die on, but if this board wants to set this up to either not be signed or to be in legal limbo for the foreseeable future, that's on this board.
So your answer is no, you do not have a written document from the city councilor about the legality of leaving out the property zone A. Is that correct, or neighborhoods?
No, because in the discussions with them, this is the work product of those discussions. This bill is.
My question was, and as an attorney, my question was to have a written document, and you do not.
No, yeah.
Okay, and the other question I had was about parking, because you said something about parking, and that made me think. So if you're on a single family block, which is mine, and we are really kind of territorial about parking in front of your own house, and if you don't, you have a garage and you have places to park behind your house. So how does that work for when you try to get information from a non-occupied person who doesn't occupy their short-term rental about parking? How is that addressed in your bill? And how would this affect that, if at all, if we did the amendment?
Sure. So coming from Dogtown, I know the parking wars are real in an area that people don't have driveways and garages and all of that. The parking in specific is addressed in the application process and then the occupancy. It's important to note that under this legislation, unlike the current status quo where you're seeing, say, a single family house on the listing, it may say it sleeps 9 people or 10 people or whatever that may be on the Airbnb list. But under this legislation, we're going with what the building division lists the occupancy at. So that's going to be limited to 2 per bedroom, things like that. So you during the permit process, you indicate how much parking, off-street parking you have. And that's one of the things that the building division takes into consideration on the overall occupancy of the unit.
So if you have no off-street parking, how does that work?
I think it works the same as the current status quo with parking, where it's part of the occupancy. There's nothing preventing an individual from parking 5 cars on the street. I deal with that all the time. But when we're looking at how many people are, cars come with people. And what we're looking to do is to limit the number of people inside any given unit. And so most people don't arrive with 2 cars. They arrive with 1 car or together.
But if we're so this amendment doesn't really address parking, but if we were arriving, say, a group of friends from college, and we all rented a place, we all brought our cars, then those cars would be parked if it was zoned a single family on a single family street, taking up parking spaces that normally would not happen. Is that correct?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. And you've been reelected? Is this your second time being reelected?
Yes, ma'am.
So do you think you know your area pretty well?
I do.
So do you believe that I know my area exceptionally well?
Absolutely.
Do you think I'm making it up when I tell you my people do not want their zoning to be changed?
I believe you.
Do you when you say this resolves something, if I create a problem for you and I resolve a problem for me, is that really a good situation there to you?
The intent here is certainly not to create problems for anyone else. It's to try to get any regulation in place on this.
I understand, but in order to get any regulations, what you're telling me is the mayor said that she will not sign it unless it includes property in a block zone, a single family. And I don't see how that gets in the way of all, because you talk about these lawsuits. Let's go back to these lawsuits that you say are going around. And so did you bring any of them can you provide me with any of them to show what has happened? Have there been any in Missouri? Is there precedent?
So currently in Kansas City, they're litigating this exact issue. So the courts will have an answer for us with all the speed of the courts.
I agree. Okay, so I hear you. So currently, how long ago do you know when that lawsuit started?
I believe so. The legislation went into effect a few months back, and litigation started basically right away.
And who's suing? Do you know that? Is it the people who live in a single family, or is it the Airbnb who said we have a right to be any place we want to?
I believe that that it was the platforms who brought suit.
And can you tell me about this lawsuit? Do they say that they have a right? Are they one of the protected classes? Race, sex, sexual orientation, sex? What is the protected class? What is their basis of their lawsuit?
I don't believe that they're arguing that they are a protected class. I believe that it's a property rights argument that's being brought. I don't have the lawsuit directly in front of me, and these, so I don't want to mislead you, because there's been similar litigation in New York, similar litigation in New Orleans, amongst others at similar times on similar issues.
So then they have a property right to locate where I have had a right for them not to locate, because their right supersedes mine because what?
So I believe the idea is, and I'm not making this argument, just the way it's presented.
Having a conversation.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am. So I have the right to rent my property. So I can rent it for a term of years. I can rent it for a term of months. It hasn't been viable outside of a boarding house situation to rent for a term of days until relatively recently, just because you weren't going to be able to find a number of people who wanted to stay to make it viable. But with this technological, I hesitate to call it an advancement, but this technological change, we now have a proliferation of people who are interested in leasing their properties on a short-term basis. And so when we're dealing with a kind of an age-old issue, when technology moves faster than government, we have these issues. And with big tech, we're essentially trying to regulate an industry whose motto is move fast and break things. And I think that we can all agree that parts of this are broken. And the government moves at all of the speed of government, which, here we are 5 years later talking about how to address this issue. And we certainly are not going to come up with some sort of perfect solution today. But the hope is my hope is that we get something in place so that we can continue pushing on this.
So you spoke about lawsuits. Do you have any instances where the Airbnb has won their lawsuit? Could you provide me a citation?
In New Orleans, I believe they did. I don't have the citation in front of me, but that created a major issue in New Orleans. On the flip side, in New York, the city of New York was successful after, I believe, 3 years of litigation.
And in New Orleans, they won it at a single family?
Yeah, the whole idea there was that you had to be, it had to be owner occupied. It was very, very similar to the amendment for us.
In New Orleans, they didn't have a restricted covenant or some kind of thing that prevented it, because you can contract your right out not to have these.
Sure. And no, my understanding of that litigation is that was not the issue that was being litigated.
Okay, and so if Airbnb have a right to do what they want to in a single family, do gas stations also have that right?
So I want to be clear here. It's not Airbnb or Verbo that has the right to do. It's the property owner. Mm-hmm. The argument is the property owner has that.
So then that undermines zoning.
Potentially.
That's going to be interesting. Do you, in law, there's something called reliance and detrimental reliance?
Sure.
So you entice me to come and live on a single family street, and then you say, now I no longer have that. Don't I also have potential for a lawsuit?
That I honestly don't know. I mean, we change zoning constantly. I can tell you that, that there was an area that was zoned, unregulated, that we made multifamily. We've done single family to multifamily. We've done multifamily to single family. Just in my 5 years here, there's tons of zoning changes that have happened, and I've never seen. I've seen some neighbors potentially be unhappy, the direct neighbors, but I've never seen a successful lawsuit saying that the city does not have the ability to change zoning.
You do not have the ability to change zoning over the objection of a property owner, except for in special instances. You might want to look that up, okay? Because you don't. The reason why you didn't probably have it is because people just said, I didn't like that. But when the property owner objects, there's a whole nother thing that you have to go through.
Sure. And, and I want to be clear, this isn't something that I dreamt up. This came from the planning committee.
I understand what you're saying. I had another question about the lawsuit. So New York was able to fight it off. New Orleans, they lost. And you say in your neighborhood, the people are okay with it because that resolves a problem that they're having with short-term rentals.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just want the city to be able to shut down problematic short-term.
Okay.
And this does that.
And how does, except for the fact that the mayor says she's going to veto it, how does restricting out F neighborhood commercial prevent that from happening? I mean, I'm sorry, not F, A single family prevent that from happening, because that would still make everything else in your bill the same. So how does that prevent that, except for the mayor says she won't sign it?
Well, I think just from crunching it a little bit, looking at the zoning map of the city, we're going to see a proliferation of these downtown, and we're not going to see them many other places, which we saw in committee, a real push-pull between people saying, hey, I'm a city resident and I like these things. And we saw people say, hey, I'm a city resident and I hate these things. And so we're trying to come up with some balance.
Are they mostly downtown already?
There's a lot of them downtown. And one of the things that this bill seeks to do is to, and I guess I'm getting off of the amendment now, but seeks to do is to address the density of them.
And so did you get a map of where short-term rentals were? Is that any place?
Yeah, there was a heat map of short-term rentals that was in committee.
Okay, and so again, most of them were downtown or in Soulard or Lafayette Square or some places like
Very heavily in downtown, and then throughout the central corridor
Right.
was the majority of them.
You didn't see many short-term rentals in North.
No.
And that's exactly my point. Okay, so you're solving a problem and creating one for us. And so, again, I would implore you to think about when we are losing population at 20-something odd Black families a month. That's not something we want to do. That you should seek a solution that that helps you, but does not create a problem for me and the people in North St. Louis. One of the things I'll tell you, in my 30-something years since I've been down here, they don't build middle and income housing in North St. Louis. The Black aldermen have complained profusely about that when we were 28, is that everything they want to do is low to mod income rental, and it takes away from our stability. And that's why the same thing that white middle class kids for Black families will do too, is that they will leave. So when you get your problem resolved and you look up and my neighborhood is empty, have you really resolved the problem? And is the mayor really thinking long term? Since she's over there on the street, I know exactly where she lives, and it's single family. I know when it got built, when Irv Clay was the alderman of the 26th ward, and I want to know, maybe I can start building some houses over there, and I can put short-term rental right by her so she can know how that feels, because there is no reason to require that a single family be a part of this, and it does not take away from, there's nothing that takes away. You said it's assuring that it will be downtown. No, it doesn't. It assures that it will not be on a single family, and that's a good thing. And I think that her board bill also spoke to places you could put it. I don't understand if we're going to change our whole zoning, because that's what you're looking to do, our whole zoning structure, how we think this is a good idea when people have bought into a zoning structure. That's how they decide where they want to live, if there's schools nearby, all of these things. All of a sudden now this is horrible because we allowed Airbnb. I'm sorry that I voted for it. I was here when they brought it. I was here when the alderwoman from the then 6th brought it, And to me, it's a mistake to listen to young people or new people say, well, this is so great, but I don't care about how that you've been there for a long time and how it's going to affect your neighborhood. And that is what I hear, that, yeah, we have a problem. So if I have to make that's a problem from you, I will do it. All of us have gotten elected. When we did a conservation district, the city of St. Louis brought that, and a lot of black aldermen didn't want it, so nobody did it in North St. Louis. I came and did it, but I did not try to tell every North St. Louis alderman that is something that was good for you. It was something that had to be worked out. When we push things on people that can afford to leave, that is what they do. When we get a city that's full of rentals and people who can get up and leave and be mad, we're not going to have a taxpayer base, and I think you all are creating a problem that you don't understand. I don't want the people who live in the alderman from the 2nd Ward to leave. I don't want the people who live in the alderwoman from the 1st Ward to live. She has a lot of single-family housing. It is not that we don't want short-term rental. We want to keep our stability. That should go to some kind of conditional use hearing for all Airbnb, for all short-term rental. It should not be pushed to change our zoning. And it is not because we don't welcome people. It's just we don't want a city that is full of just rental and not ownership. So that we don't have anything in writing from the city councilor. As soon as I leave here, I'm going to ask her for an opinion about why this has to be this way, and if it's only because the mayor will veto it or because we will get sued, I guarantee you there's going to be a lawsuit one way or another, because we cannot change people's zoning like this without them fighting and pushing back. And I hope that we join together from the 1st Ward, the 2nd Ward, the 12th Ward, the 11th Ward. I hope that there are a lot of aldermen and their constituents who say, this is not for me, and why would you try to force this down our throat? And I am going to support the alderwoman from the 8th in her any effort to take out A, B, or C. I could probably deal with C, but A and B a lot of times are on city streets together. I have a street 1 block over from where I live. Mine is all single family, but theirs is 90% single family with just a few Bs that were allowed because people said, well, it won't hurt you, it'll just be a few, and that was always owner occupied by the person. And now that those people have died and we have rental, it's a very different block, and we're having to put up with that. And you're creating a problem, and you're seeking a solution, but you're creating a problem for me. And so I will continue to support whatever the alderwoman from the 8th is seeking to do that would prevent you from creating that problem. Not because I don't want you to have a solution, but I don't want you to get a solution at my expense or at my community's expense. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'm going to go to the alderwoman from the 8th because I think she wants to make a change to her amendment, and then I'll take further comment on that if that is all right with you. Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President. So there, I don't know where we are. We are still on amendment number 1.
Correct. So you will, if you want to replace it, then I need the alderman from the 2nd to withdraw his second, and you to.
I would like to withdraw my motion to for amendment number 1 on Board Bill 33 floor substitute.
Okay.
And with that, Madam President, we are.
Alderwoman, could you speak into the mic? Folks at home are having a hard time hearing you.
And with that, Madam President, we are preparing a new amendment, which I believe will have the number 25 associated with it in the drive, but would be now considered amendment number 1 that we're withdrawing. And this is the same exact language as we have before us, except Section B would read, certain dwelling districts, no short-term rental permit may be issued within a dwelling district zoned a single family without a conditional use permit. And what that does is it eliminates the restriction on single family home permits from owner occupied, but then just requires a conditional use permit so that neighbors can weigh in. And there's another process associated with that permit. We are preparing it. I believe it should maybe be up in the drive at this point, or maybe being worked on at that by the clerk, and should be just shortly. But that the other language remains the same in the amendment, and it just changes section B to requiring a conditional use permit for properties zoned A.
So there has been a motion to place amendment number 1 before us. Is there a second? It's been seconded by, very enthusiastically, by the alderman from the 5th. So Alderwoman, you may proceed if you would like on that amendment.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, this again is just, further protect, this is a layer of input from neighbors to weigh in on those, properties that have a single family zoning.
Any further discussion? I think the Alderwoman from, you've already spoken, so I'm going to go to the Alderwoman from the 1st, and then the Alderwoman from the 7th, and then the Alderman from the.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I appreciate all the work that has gone into this board bill in general and then in the amendment process now. I think the one thing that I spoke with the sponsor about this morning that I just didn't see in the bill was the consideration of the proliferation of Airbnbs in zoning districts that have more single family and multifamily residential units. We had in the board bill, in the floor substitute, a lot of wording about the size of the building and the percentage of allowable per size. But in areas that I represent, the issue is more in the single family districts where a single family house may become problematic. So I wanted to see something more that helps in that area. And I think that this amendment that we have in front of us allows for some of the considerations that the Alderman from the 6th so kindly spoke about, the Shaw's neighborhood situations in which folks really do like having some Airbnbs available in their neighborhood all around them for out-of-town visitors, and that it can be a benefit for the neighborhood. And then in hearing that, a conditional use process could be put into place for them, that is, I think, an interesting compromise to both allow it in the zoning district, but conditionally, so that both sides are kind of coming to a compromise there. Thank you. I do plan to support this amendment.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
I had some questions. I got a chance to talk to Alderwoman by going over there and having a conversation. So I had them about the previous amendment. This is a new amendment that we're discussing now. So I'm just taking a look through this. I think this might address some of what I was going to what I was going to ask. I guess my question would be of Alderman Narayan, actually.
Alderman Narayan, would you yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 7th?
I will.
Yeah, I just want to
Alderwoman, you may
hear your
proceed.
thoughts on this amendment. I know we had some concerns that if this was eliminated altogether, that might raise some litigation issues. And for me, in the 7th Ward, we've, unfortunately, because there's no regulation in place, we already have single families and multifamilies that have short-term regulations operating them. And so I had a big concern that if we were caught up in litigation, that might hurt our ability to implement those things and put that in place. So I'm just curious now, since this amendment doesn't propose eliminating them altogether, but putting them in conditional use for single families, what your thoughts are.
So, I'm looking at amendment number 23.
It's listed 23 in the drive, but it's technically number 1.
Sure, but what I'm seeing in the drive doesn't say anything about.
Sorry, Alderman, it's listed as.
I don't have a 25 in my drive. Beautiful. Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay.
Alderwoman Sonier, I don't have an issue with this.
Okay, excellent. I give my inquiry of that.
Right. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 5th.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of this. Having been a business owner, you know, when you want to open a business, and Airbnbs are a business. If you collect money for someone doing something, you are in business. And every business in the city of St. Louis is required to do what? Have a conditional use hearing. You want to open a restaurant, coffee shop, tattoo parlor, or if you want to even buy a building and turn it into an apartment, you have to have a conditional use hearing. It's simple, basic government. So that gives the people who live in a single-family residential the right to weigh in on whether they can have a business. They might want this business in the neighborhood if they know the neighbors, if they know they can talk to someone. So a conditional use hearing would make this bill palatable for me. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Okay. I just want to make a note here. I do think it's interesting that for this conditional use process, there is no plat and petition required for them to operate. I'm just making that note that it's interesting what processes we have in place and what operates and what has to go through that process and what doesn't. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
Check, check. I got to work. Can I inquire of the Alderman from the 12th Ward?
Would the Alderwoman from the 12th yield to questioning from the Alderman for the 14th? Try talking into if
She don't want nobody else germs. We got all day.
Okay, now we're good. Yes, I will.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I was just, I think this is it seems like a good amendment. I know you said, or actually I want to go off the Alderwoman of the 7th Ward comments talking about, we doing conditional use on this while we're not doing plat and petition on it. And I know there's been conversations maybe with some other unhoused bills or whatnot, but as you were shaking your head and your years of experience, why would you, I just want to get a little learning session, why would you agree that we should probably be doing plat and petition process around here?
I don't really agree that for conditional use. So first of all, I'm going to vote for it because it's better than what he's proposing. And I'm going to come back because I agree with the Alderwoman from the 7th. If we're going to ask for plat and petition for other things, then treat everybody fairly. You will find out I'm a real fair person about that, So if you're going to do it for the homeless, you do it for everybody. And I would even go and to verify those petitions, because with liquor plat and petitions, I have actually gone out and found them to be falsified and had to. So I am on her side, and I will help her draw up another amendment that, even though this goes to the mayor's office, that there really should be a plat and petition if you're going to apply for that.
Gotcha. Thank you, Alderwoman. Can I inquire of the Alderman of the 4th Ward?
the Alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the Alderman for the 14th.
I will.
How you doing, Alderman?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Would you accept an amendment that changes from conditional use to plat and petition process?
I think that's more a question for this body than for me. I would like to. I think that what the heck is the amendment number 25 gets this done in my estimation. I would be supportive of amendment 25. I would have to look at whatever a plat and petition may be as far as the range and there's more details that I would want to know before I committed one way or another.
I appreciate it. No other questions, madam. President.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 5th, that we adopt Amendment number 1 to Board Bill number 33, floor substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Vollmer. I'm sorry, Alderman Vollmer. Thank you. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd. 12 aye votes and 1 abstain.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 8th to approve Amendment number 1 to Board Bill 33, floor substitute. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Okay, good. My young new friends from the 14th and the 7th make a very valid point about the plaque petition. We should not be treating people differently, be it homeless, liquor, whatever we're doing. If we're going to do that, then everybody should have to go through it. I had asked people if they would entertain a friendly amendment that's not in writing, just saying that the building division shall develop a platted petition to be used. And so I'm just asking, since they are working with us, if we would work with them.
Sorry, who is your question directed to?
I'm sorry. The Alderwoman from the 8th.
Would the Alderwoman from the 8th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th?
Yes.
Okay. As I said, my friends down at this end, it's the young end of the board. She made a valid point, the Alderwoman from the 7th. Her concern is that we're requiring a platinum petition for the homeless shelters, and we do it for liquor. So if we're going to do something conditional use, would we be open to amending this amendment to a friendly amendment? I know we've already passed it, but I add another amendment that said that would include a platinum petition, that the building division would have to include a platinum petition of 500 feet or whatever.
I will say I'm open to anything, really. I mean, I think having that discussion is worthwhile. I understand this body is considering relaxing or eliminating the platinum petitions for other pieces. But I guess, you know what I mean? So for me, I'm open to, discussion on it. I mean, I think letting the neighbors weigh in is important, and that's one avenue to do that. So certainly I would be open for that discussion here.
What I wanted to see, I guess my question is, we need to do it now, because if we wait and we pass this bill, then we'd have to send it back. And
I would agree taking that step now could be effective. I would also say that I think in discussing platinum petitions in a general sense and in zoning, I mean, we could also consider that in a more broad discussion. For example, I'm aware that you need a platinum petition for a liquor license for a homeless shelter. I believe you still need one for a tattoo shop and maybe for a massage parlor. I'm not sure.
I think a boarding house also is.
For a boarding house. So I think it would actually be worthwhile for this, for all of us, for us to take a look at where those are required, under what circumstances, what feet, number of feet, and that sort of thing. in a general sense. And I would be very open to having that discussion today as we consider this or in the future. But I certainly think we should be considering it in a broad sense, as the Alderwoman from the 7th pointed out, because these policies don't exist in a vacuum, and we should have some consistency and fairness across how we do things. I would be, so we do require conditional uses for many things without the plat and petition, and we do require plat and petitions for some things. How those things were reasoned, I'm not sure of the history, to be honest, of all those, and I'm not even sure of all the circumstances under which you need a plat and petition. I think there are several that we don't even, probably like some milk truck archaic thing that exists. It requires that, who knows, our charters some funky stuff in it. So certainly open to that discussion.
Alderwoman, they withdrew their request, so I'm going to leave that alone. They said they're not interested in pushing it now, so I will withdraw. We'll revisit it as holistically.
I will say we should be considering this in a broad sense.
I agree.
And I think that discussion is worthwhile, and I appreciate it being brought up here. So,
okay, thank you. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I was going to respond to Alderwoman Tyus's, point. I totally appreciate your support and your solidarity. I don't want to get us off course from the conversation at hand, but I think what I was wanting to point to is I think if you look at these policies, the things that we have plat and petition for and what we don't, I think there's a class conversation to have there about some of the things that those in place for versus what they don't. And I'm in favor of going the direction that the proposed process for the liquor license goes now, and the other legislation on the table as it correlates to shelters also kind of is going in the same direction of saying plat and petition process is a very challenging, problematic process that sometimes eliminates things before they can open. So that was my reasoning for saying, that's a separate conversation.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This has been a long and drawn out process over the last 5 years, and I'm hoping that we just saw the last of the sausage making before we perfect this bill. I ask for all your favorable consideration, and I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 7th, or Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill number 33, floor substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Oh, floor substitute as amended. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd. 12 aye votes and 1 abstain.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 4th to perfect Board Bill number 33, floor substitute as amended.
Board Bill 34, sponsored by Alderman Narayan, President Green, Alderwoman Velazquez, and Alderwoman Sanye. An ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission of the City of St. Louis pertaining to the zoning code of the City of St. Louis, enacting a new chapter 26.76 of the subject of short-term rental with definitions and establishing short-term rental as permitted use in all zonings of the City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 34.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This is the companion bill for 33. This has to pass for anything in 33 to come into effect. it's mostly definitions, and 33 is really the controlling piece of legislation here, so that the conditional use that we just put into 33 will be controlling over 34. Excuse me. I moved to perfect Board Bill 34.
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board Bill number 34. Alderman, you may proceed.
So everything that I just said, and and everything that we just discussed during 33, and we need 34 to pass for 33 to come into effect. With that, I ask for your favorable consideration.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 8th.
I do have a set of amendments for Board Bill 34 that I'd like to discuss when appropriate, when you'll entertain that, Madam President. They're in the drive.
All right,
There's 1, 2, 3.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. So I'll quickly describe. The amendments 1, 2, and 3 are all related to one another, and what they really just do, the first one just eliminates the words that that blanketly state that short-term rentals should be permitted in every zoning district. It eliminates those words, and then goes on. Amendment number 2 puts back in, and you can see here, Section A, short-term rental owner occupied for zoning district A. And B and C, it just says that they're subject, that they are allowed in those zones, but subject to the requirements from Board Bill 33. And so it just kind of, it makes it very clear that it eliminates that blanket statement, which I think many lawyers in the sort of community have identified could be a problem in establishing a precedent that may be difficult to undo. And then it also, again, clarifies that, especially for that zoning district A, which we just made that small amendment, that they're allowed in zoning district A, but with the caveat, the specific caveat that they're subject to the provisions of Board Bill 33. Now, I recognize that if we pass this amendment, it may need to go back before planning. But I think we're all in agreement that, it will take a very long time, up to a year, for the building division to get up to speed in enforcing this. So I think to put it before planning would be a very simple and short process to do. So with that, those are the amendment number 3 sort of does.
Alderwoman, could we take one amendment?
Sure. I just want to quickly, just since they're all sort of like just related to each other, it just sort of clarifies those zoning pieces.
Did you want to make a motion to adopt amendment number 1?
I would like to make a motion to adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 34.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we adopt amendment number 1. Any discussion? Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'm going to oppose any amendments to 34. Amendments to 34 have to go back before the Planning Commission. Planning Commission meets from time to time, and that's going to put 34 has to then be refiled and come all the way back through this process. 33 is really the controlling piece of legislation here. I would encourage us to get this through so that we can get these regulations in place and get started. Nothing in 33 matters until 34 is passed. I will be opposing any amendment to 34, and I would encourage you all to do the same. Thank you.
Alderman from the 5th.
Madam President, will the Alderman from the 4th yield to questions?
The Alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the Alderman from the 5th.
Absolutely.
Alderman, you may proceed.
All right. Is there anything in Board Bill 34 that would supersede or override anything we've passed in Board Bill 33 and make it, void?
No, and just to to be very, very clear on that, assuming we can perfect these both, I'd be happy to hold 33 for a week, past 34, and then past 33, so that 33 would be the last piece of legislation and therefore the controlling piece of legislation.
Okay, so, because 33, I believe we've done something marvelous today with 33 because we have given control to neighbors. And if that 34 does not affect it, I have no problem, supporting 34 without the amendment. I believe that the amendment might be unnecessary if 33 is a controlling piece. And with that, would the Alderwoman from the 8th yield?
The Alderwoman from the 8th yield to questioning from the Alderman from the
How do
5th.
you feel about my comment?
Well,
Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Submit first.
I will yield.
You may proceed, Alderman.
I think the question was, how do I feel about?
Well, yeah, about the comment, not in general.
Sure.
Yeah, how you doing?
I don't know if you feel great. How you doing? All right. I would disagree a little bit. I think, as the Alderman from the 4th pointed out, this is the controlling piece of legislation, Board Bill 34. What I'm concerned about is this blanket statement that short-term rental be permitted in every zoning district, and that's just a blanket statement. That is setting a precedent that could be difficult to undo. So what I'm doing here with these amendments is specify very clearly they are allowed in these zoning districts under the circumstances that we've outlined in Board Bill 33. And I do think it's important that we do that, especially considering that we just put in a requirement for a conditional use permit. Putting in a zoning code, this is an amendment for Board Bill 34. This is a big deal, by the way. This is an amendment to our zoning code, and putting in a blanket statement that they are allowed in every zoning district with a period at the end of that sentence, I think carries some danger, in my opinion. And so what my amendments do is seek to clarify that and specify under what circumstances, the circumstances that we just outlined in Board Bill 33, which, by the way, passed unanimously here at the Board of Aldermen. Thank you all very much. We did a great job there. But I mean, it really just specifies that. And to the Alderman from the point that the Planning Commission meets from time to time, they meet fairly regularly. In fact, they've got 2 upcoming meetings in the next 3 to 4 weeks. One on Wednesday, October 18th. Another one on Wednesday, November 8th. There's plenty of opportunities for the Planning Commission to reconsider this. And again, we'll have a year before this thing goes into effect. And so, I mean, while these changes are small in nature, they're clarifying, and I think they're important from a legal perspective and to make this extra clear and to prevent any unintended consequences of a blanket allowing for short-term rentals in every zoning as the current Board Bill 33 contemplates.
All right, thank you very much. So with that being said, and I heard the Alderman from the 4th saying that he was willing to hold these bills. Is there any interest in holding these till we get this before the Planning Commission and get this done correctly? If it's just removing that blanket statement or doing the amendment today? Alderman for the 4th, will you yield to a question?
The Alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the Alderman from the 5th.
I heard the question, so.
Yeah, so what I was mentioning is holding it after perfection to get the order of operations here, if that was the concern. But I would certainly like to move this today.
Put me on, will you? Thank you. It's not the microphones, it's the controlling person over there. So, all right, but with that, then I lean more towards supporting this amendment than rather doing a blanket change to our zoning code. I was just wondering if we could come to some sort of agreement on this. So thank you very much for your time.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you. To be clear, 33 is a set of regulations that goes on top of everything. So even though it says that it's permitted in every zoning district, 33 then applies all sorts of regulations. We make sure that you can't get a permit if you have ongoing nuisance violations. We make sure that you can't get a permit if you have violated the conditions in the past year. We make sure you can't get a permit if this is more than 4, you already have 4 permits. So there's all sorts of conditions that are put into 33 that we just passed, and it doesn't really undo anything that 34 says. So I don't think it's necessary to amend 34. Since we are still allowing short-term rentals in single-family zoning, we're just requiring another condition, that is the conditional use permit. So I don't see it as necessary to amend 34 and think we can proceed.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th? Or is there? Sorry. Alderwoman from the 8th?
Thank you, Madam President. I wholeheartedly disagree, and here's why. We've talked a lot today about potential litigation and lawsuits. And as the sponsor of this bill has pointed out, every major city that's passed legislation related to Airbnbs has had a lawsuit. If, in fact, the city of St. Louis becomes the next city to experience a lawsuit, and, for example, any of Board Bill 33 gets thrown out, all of those regulations go out the door. And what we're left with, potentially, is a major zoning change, which allows blanketly short-term rentals in every zoning district in the city of St. Louis. If instead we amend that and say we are allowing them in these zoning districts subject to Board Bill 33, we have just provided a protection for ourselves in the event that a lawsuit throws out the entirety of Board Bill 33 or any number of provisions within it. And so I do think it's important that the zoning change very clearly specify the circumstances under which we are allowing short-term rentals in every zoning district in the city of St. Louis.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I agree totally with the Alderwoman from the 8th, and I will go on to say that if you read the board bills, and we're talking about Board Bill number 34, it says an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission of the City of St. Louis pertaining to the zoning code. It is a recommendation. We are the Board of Aldermen, and we make the final say. In fact, although we think that that has to be, we can take recommendations and throw them in the trash can and vote a different way. People don't know that, but we can. We can do it with zoning bills. We can do it with tax abatement bills. It's a recommendation. The second thing is, if we pass this, both of these, this amendment, then we won't have to be questioned about if there really is a requirement for conditional use, because once you say you have a right, what is the requirement for conditional use? The conditional use is because you don't have a right by law. Once you leave that language in there without taking that language out of there, you've undone what we did with Board Bill 33. You need this language, and it doesn't slow anything down. We can pass this and then not third read it until zoning has a hearing. We can just hold it on informal. We do that with when we pass a bill and then we have to wait for ENA to sign it. So I'm a policy wonk, and I'm also a rules wonk. It does not have to be done in the order that is being promoted. The Alderman from the 8th is exactly correct. It is the correct way to do it, so you don't create a problem with just what we all did, because otherwise it could be interpreted that you don't need a condition, and that part can be thrown out, and then we will not have done what we were trying to do.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 9th.
If we do amend it, then I suggest that we amend it to just say as allowed and refer to Board Bill 33, just to make as clear as possible. I don't think the current wording is exactly the route we should go. I think we should just refer back to our own board bill.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Alderman from the 9th, I think that makes a lot of sense. I wonder if it has to say the current board bill or any other legislation passed, so we don't have to amend it again, but that would be my only editorial to what you just said. I think that makes a lot of sense. Alderman from the 9th just recommended going to have one line that says, that the whole board bill 40 or 34 rather is dependent on what was passed in board bill 33 or perfected. So it would just be kind of referencing in general. Is that, if he will yield, I think that's what he said.
Would the Alderman from the 9th yield to questioning the Alderwoman first?
Can you please just repeat what you said, just so we can all be on the same page? Thank you.
Yes. So I think that we should, if we're going to amend 34, we should add a line that simply says that we are permitting in zoning districts as provided in Board Bill 33.
I yield.
Alderwoman from the 1st, are you still inquiring of the Alderman from the 9th?
I yield. Thanks.
Alderwoman from the 8th?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Alderman from the 9th. That's precisely what Amendment number 2 does. It replaces the blanket statement of having it be permitted in every zoning district, and very specifically says that it's allowed in short-term rental is allowed subject to additional provisions. Board Bill 33. So it does exactly that. Say again. That's exactly what the amendment does. To your point, one of the things we don't want to do is say subject blanketly to any. I mean, you want to be very, you want to be specific, and that way, again, if it gets thrown out or there's some legal action that, for example, throws out all of 33 or major parts of it, we don't want that blanket statement that they're permitted. We want to, we want to. If it's thrown out, it's thrown out, and so this protects us by saying it's subject to the provisions in Board Bill 33. But to your point, it's exactly what I'm proposing we do.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Please, Alderwoman from the 6th, please state your point of order.
Or a question, but were we going through each amendment one by one?
Correct. So the
So we were
amendment
still on-
that is before us right now, amendment number 1.
That's right. So you're saying, so we haven't got to amendment 2 that
Correct. We must
essentially Alderman
them one
Browning is
by-
saying. Okay,
by one.
I just want to clarify. So
Okay. Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President, for further clarification. They go together, so I wouldn't recommend doing, you're doing them together so that, we're not eliminating it entirely, we're specifying where we're replacing it. And I guess in theory, what we could have done and what it might have been easier for this body to consider was combining those into one sort of package amendment that does those things at one time rather than dividing out the language.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we adopt Amendment 1 to Board Bill number 34. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Ryan. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
No.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge.
By your vote, you failed to sustain the motion on amendment number 1. We are back to Board Bill number 34. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to introduce number 2. Well, that blanket statement, unfortunately, is going to make it into our zoning code. I still would like to specify and clarify that in short-term rental, zoning A, B, and C, that they are subject to additional provisions, of the additional provisions of Chapter 825 and Board Bill 33.
Are you seeking to make a motion to adopt amendment number 2?
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we adopt amendment number 2 to Board Bill 34.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 2nd, that we adopt amendment number 2 to Board Bill number 34. Is there any discussion? Alderman from the 4th? No. Seeing no discussion, it's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 2nd. There's been a request for previous roll. Hearing no objection, motion for amendment number 2 fails. We are back to Board Bill number 34. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized to close.
Thank you all. I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we perfect Board 34. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd. 10 aye votes, 2 no votes, and 1 abstain.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 4th to perfect Board Bill number 34. Report of engrossment.
We have none.
Please dispense with line item 17. Third read and final passage of board bills consent.
We have none.
Third reading and final passage of board bills.
We have none.
Report of the finally passed and signed by the President.
We have none.
Can dispense with line items number 18A through 19. Alderman from the 3rd, you are recognized on the motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 130 for.
I move we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution 130.
I have a point of order.
Of order.
I was raised my hand to be recognized to suspend the rules for a resolution as well, and mine was on the desk first. Is it possible I could be recognized?
Alderman from the 3rd asked to be recognized first, so I'm going to proceed with the Alderman from the 3rd.
Wow.
Alderman from the 3rd, you may proceed.
Thank you. Resolution 130 is to stand in solidarity with the people of Israel.
This is just on the suspension of the rule.
Right. So I would move that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution 130.
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 3rd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 130. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green,
Aye.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderman Orion. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Thank you. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Spencer. Was that? Thank you. Alderman Brownie. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd. 6 aye votes, 2 no votes, and 5 voted present.
By your vote, you failed to sustain the motion from the alderman from the 3rd. Alderman from the 2nd.
I move to suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 129.
It's been moved by the alderman from the 2nd, seconded by the alderman from the 5th, that we adopt, or that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 128.
29.
29. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Orion. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Brownie. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Present.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Keys. Oh, I'm sorry. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd.
You have to vote. You have to give. What do you want me to?
Alderwoman Spencer.
Because this is on.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd.
Okay, so Spencer is a no. Can I make a resolution?
I didn't hear.
She said no.
Okay.
Is there a prevailing side on 130?
You just give the vote. She did vote.
I did.
That's 5 aye votes, 1 no vote, and 7 voted present.
So by your vote, you failed to sustain the motion for the introduction of resolution number 129. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Alderwoman from the 8th, you are recognized on the suspension of the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 131.
Thank you, Madam President. Resolution 131 is the language from 130, 130, which is the amended version, which is actually an amended version of 129. And it isn't on everyone's desk, but with permission of the president, we are considering make a friendly amendment to 130 to put a 1 where the 0 is.
Why don't we take a 5-minute recess so we can get 131 in the drive and on everybody's desk? So we will recess for 5 minutes. And we are back. Alderman from the 3rd, you are recognized on the motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 31 for first reading.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Resolution 131.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 3rd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution number 131. There was a request for previous roll and there was an objection. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Odenberg. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Boyd. 6 aye votes, 2 no votes, and 5 voted present.
By your vote, you failed to sustain the motion for the introduction of resolution number 131. Right. First reading of resolutions.
Resolution 125, sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus, hire retired police officers for part-time traffic officers.
Alderwoman from the 12th, you're recognized on the first reading of resolution number 125.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'd ask that Resolution 125 be read.
Madam Clerk, could you please read the resolution?
Resolution 125 to hire retired police officers for part-time traffic officers. Whereas for many years, the residents of North St. Louis have been frightened to drive Natural Bridge, West Florissant, North Grand, and Kings Highway Boulevard because of the traffic accidents and multitude of fatalities resulting from speeding cars hitting pedestrians. Whereas the City of St. Louis failed to properly address the speeding issue in North St. Louis, and now residents across the City of St. Louis are terrified to drive on many of the streets across the city. Many aldermen, alderwomen, police officers, Citizen Service Bureau report receiving daily complaints regarding traffic offenses such as drag racing, excessive speeding, running stop signs, running red lights, and going down one-way streets the wrong way. Whereas currently the city is experiencing a pandemic of people who flagrantly violate traffic laws. They purposefully run stop signs and traffic lights and drive at high speeds on residential, secondary, and major streets. These traffic violations are resulting in loss of life for pedestrians and those in vehicles and property damage. In order to slow down the speeding and other violations, alderpersons have been forced to spend a vast amount of St. Louis work funds on speed humps and other traffic calming devices. Whereas with the shortage of police, especially traffic police officers, the traffic offenders do not see traffic officers on the street of St. Louis and don't seem to face real consequences, not even a traffic ticket. In March of 2020, the sponsor of this resolution came up with the idea of hiring retired St. Louis City police officers on a part-time basis as traffic officers. Speaking to then Personnel Director Richard Frank, then Police Chief Commander John Hayden, and some retired police officers who live in the First Ward, and several alderpersons regarding this idea, and all seem supportive of the idea. Whereas, upon further investigation of the potential for the city hiring retired police officers to add to the number of police officers who could work in the traffic division on a part-time basis, the sponsor discovered that an impediment to such a possibility might be the requirements of the police retirement system, that they may have rules that prevent a retired police officer from collecting his or her full benefits under the plan while working part-time for up to 20 hours as police officer in the traffic division. Whereas if there are impediments to allow retired police to work part-time up to 20 hours a week as the police officers in the traffic division, then the Board of Aldermen Public Safety Committee should convene a meeting with the representatives of the police retirement system, the police and personnel department, to inquire if there are ways to modify any impediments to allow retired police officers to work part-time as traffic officers. Now, therefore, let it be resolved, as traffic safety is the most pressing issue in the city of St. Louis, and the Public Safety Committee of this Honorable Board of Aldermen convenes to meet with the representative of the police retirement system, the police, and personnel to inquire if there are ways to modify any requirements the police retirement system, state law requirements, or any other impediments so as to allow retired police officers to work part-time as police in the traffic division, thus allowing city police to start hiring retired police officers for part-time traffic officers, so as to increase traffic officers' presence in the streets of St. Louis City. Be it further resolved that after the meeting, the public safety report back to the full board as to the outcome of the meeting. Introduced this 13th day of October 2023 by the Honorable Sharon Tyers, Alderwoman of the 12th Ward.
Madam President,
You may proceed.
I request that Resolution 125 be sent to Public Safety.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 12th, seconded by the Alderman from the 4th, that resolution number 125 is the Public Safety Committee. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 126, sponsored by Alderwoman Tyers, reaffirming Resolution 150, passed in bank December 1st, 2022, and requesting a report from the City of St. Louis, SLDC, and LRA.
Alderwoman from the 12th, you are recognized on resolution number 126.
Madam President, members of the board, we passed Resolution 150 in bank in our last session, and it requested a number of things. Basically, it requested that the City of St. Louis come up with a grass cutting schedule, look into how to cut trees, how to do city services as it pertains to LRA property, separating LRA out from under the building division and also the forestry division, as our city charter never envisioned that we would have 7,000 or 8,000 properties. And it was passed in bank, but since that time we haven't gotten any progress, and so I was requesting that Resolution 126 be sent to the HUD's committee so that we could convene some kind of hearing and try to get a progress report about what is going on with our LRA properties and how we can better service the areas that have so many of these properties.
You requesting unanimous consent or sending to?
Sending it to committee is what I said, yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry, I did not hear you.
That's all right.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 12th. Was there a second? Seconded by the Alderman from the 5th, that we send resolution number 126 to the, did you say HUDs?
I still call it HUD, so I don't know what it's called now. Okay.
To the HUDs committee. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of first reading of resolutions in reference to committees.
Second reading of resolutions, committee reports and adoption.
Report from the Legislation Committee, reappointment of Mr. George Hitt to the Board of Adjustment.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on Mayor Jones's reappointment of George Hitt to the Board of Adjustment. It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman 14th, that we approve Mayor Jones's reappointment to the Board of Adjustment. Is there any discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As before, I continue to oppose these nominations that exclude a great portion of North St. Louis. Just to kind of talk to you, to explain to you, there's a person named Mona Parsley that's there, Joe Kitsings, Irene Soil, George Hitt, and Carmelo Desmond. All of these people are from Central West End or South St. Louis. There's no one from North St. Louis at all on it. In fact, the alternate was a John Albert, and all these people's terms have expired, by the way. There was a John Albert who was the only black person, and that was from the old 22nd Ward. Sally Burke is the alternate, and then there was a vacant nomination. I have been contacting the mayor's office for a number of years, trying to get representation from all parts of the city as is required, and this has not been the case. So as always, I will be opposing a nomination which excludes a great part of the city and is not in keeping with that we should have people from all parts of the city, especially as these are the people who do hearings and can make decisions that are adverse to your community. We have a gas station that my neighborhood came out in Vink to say that they did not want it. That gas station is at the corner of St. Louis Avenue and Kings Highway. Mr. Hitt was there. He, along with other members of this not esteemed Board of Adjustment to me, voted to put it there anyway. We've had shootings. We have all kind of problems. There was no reason to vote it because we have an ordinance that says there cannot be gas stations there, but yet it sits there anyway. This is not right to have a representation that makes binding legal decisions, especially when they go against the ordinances that are in the law. They did this with the help of Michael Garvin, who now doesn't want to answer how he did that and how is it that an ordinance was overdone. So I will continue to oppose not only Mr. Hitt because he was part of that whole process that was very unfair to my community, and now we're having to try to shut it down, but also just because I cannot imagine anybody here wanting to be part of a neighborhood that was excluded the way this current mayor is doing. It makes no sense at all. We've sent people to her. She will not appoint them. And if this was somebody that was Caucasian, we would have all kind of protests and things out. It is not right for black mayors, white mayors, female mayors, male mayors to leave out a whole portion of the city as they don't exist. And it is also a violation of one of our ordinances. And so therefore, I am asking for a roll call so that I can vote no.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 14th, that we approve the mayor's reappointment to the Board of Adjustment. Was there a request for roll call? Yes. Okay. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Odenberg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge, President Green,
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Keys, Alderwoman Boyd. 11 aye votes and 1 no vote.
By your vote, you have sustained the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th to approve Mayor Jones' appointment to the Board of Adjustment. Courtesy resolutions. Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adopt the courtesy resolution.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 23, announcement.
Wednesday, October the 18th, 2023, Budget and Public Employee will have a meeting via webinar at 9:30 a.m. Friday, October 20th, 2023, full board meeting in the Kennedy Room at 10 a.m. That's the extent of the announcements.
Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 10th, or 8th, sorry.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I don't think this is probably the right place to do this, but could we just, could I ask for a moment of silence for the victims of violence in Palestine and Gaza Strip right now?
Yes, we could all bow our heads for a moment of silence. Any further announcements? Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President. Public Safety will have a meeting 2 p.m. Thursday here.
Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 10th.
On Sunday at 5807 Page at the corner of Goodfellow, just west of Goodfellow. That's at 2 p.m. Many of us down here served and remember Jeanette Culpepper, and this will be the 2nd annual balloon release in honor of her and in honor of lymphoma cancer.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to also announce that this evening in Dutchtown, it's their first inaugural Autumn Chill event taking place along the Virginia corridor. You can get more information at dutchtownstl.org. And then over at the Thomas Dunn Learning Center, there is also the Dark Arts reception, which should be a really awesome event as well. I plan on being at both of those as much as I can this evening. And also appreciate the Alderwoman from the 8th requesting the moment of silence. I will probably be speaking more about this later, but just want to it's very emotional. As many of you might know, I was raised in an interfaith family, Jewish and Catholic and a couple others mixed in there. I'm probably one of the few, if not maybe the only older person that's actually been to Israel. My grandmother took me there after my graduation from high school, and we traveled everywhere. And from the north to the south, the east to the west, it's a very beautiful country, and it's ravaged by conflict and war. And I brought with me today a tambourine that my grandmother brought back from Israel, and it's one of the few things that I have that belongs to her. And I don't know how many of you are familiar, but Bill Withers has a song called Grandma's Hands, and it starts by saying that Grandma clapped in church on Sunday mornings. Grandma played the tambourine so well, and it's a song that touches my heart every time I hear it. Because I have such fond memories of her, and I will always treasure that time that we spent together in Israel. It was just her and I, and I'm one of almost 30 grandkids that she had. So it was really a true privilege to be able to share that experience with her. And the conflict, the war that's going on right now, many folks in the Jewish faith are still sitting Shiva, which is a time of spiritual and emotional reckoning and healing that lasts for 7 days within the Jewish community. And I mention that because a lot of people, even in the St. Louis community, have friends and have family that are in Israel, and they're mourning the loss of loved ones. They're worried about friends and family in Israel. They're worried about friends and family in Palestine and Gaza. And my heart goes out to all of them. And so I do appreciate everyone taking a moment of silence during today's meeting. That means a great deal to me, and I hope that we can take further action on this as well. But certainly, thank you all. Appreciate it very much. And thank you for indulging me.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you. I just want to remind everybody that we're going to be having a town hall on October 19th at Bar K. You can bring your dogs. I really would like you to bring your dogs. I'd like to meet your dogs. They'll get in free that night if you bring them to the town hall. So please come see this great thing in our ward and you on Thursday night. Oh, and Circuit Attorney Gabe Gore will be our guest. So that should be a very interesting discussion. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
Please bring your dogs. He wants to see those dogs. I want to give a huge happy birthday to one of the honorary members of the 14th Ward. She's somebody very special to me. She's used to live in the 14th Ward. She don't anymore. She kind of like lives in her own ward and somehow became an alderwoman of the Simmery 7th Ward. She turned 28 yesterday. And it's just been an honor to get to know her, call her not just a colleague, but actually a family member, sister, and would love to send her a happy, shimmery birthday from the Alderman of 14th as well from the Board of Aldermen. I hope you had a great time yesterday and have a great weekend, Alderwoman.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? I would just like to also, in kind of a happy note, send congratulations in advance to Christina Garmendia, the policy director in my office, who is getting married tomorrow. So when you see her when she comes back, congratulate her on that. But just wanted to give her a shout out and best wishes from the board. All right. Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to excuse the alders from the 11th and the 13th Ward for necessary absence.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we use the aforementioned alder people for necessary absence. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Madam President. Move that we adjourn until Friday, October 20th, 2023 at 1200 Market Street in the Kennedy Hearing Room.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we adjourn until Friday, October 20th, 2023 at 1200 Market Street in the Kennedy Hearing Room, so right back here. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.